Please don't forget subscribe to the channel and hit the bell to get notified of new daily videos.
The thing about risk is that you never truly see it coming, not the life-altering kind anyway. You can spend 40 hours a week modeling it, pricing it, building a whole career on the statistical probability of a hurricane hitting a data center in Nebraska. I do. My name is Anderson Taylor, and I am an actuary at Commonwealth Surety Group. It is my job to be the guy in the room who calmly explains how everything can go wrong. It doesn't make you popular at parties, but it keeps the lights on and the future predictable. Or so I thought. I had all my own risks accounted for. Life insurance, flood insurance, a meticulously balanced 401k with a conservative but respectable yield. I had a plan. But there is no insurance policy for your own brother deciding to light your life on fire for the down payment on a flashy new sports car. They don't write actuarial tables for that kind of liability. It all started here in the dust and the silence of my parents' attic in Arlington. Mom and Dad had been gone 6 months, and the weight of executor/grieving son had fallen squarely on my shoulders. I was sorting through a lifetime of memories, one cardboard box at a time. Labeling everything, of course. My label maker was getting the work out of its life. Dad woodworking manuals 1985 to 2010. Mom quilting supplies non-salvageable. Order in the chaos. It is how I cope. Then I got to the box labeled Foster's Trophies. My brother. It was overflowing with cheap gold-plated plastic. Soccer trophies from a league he quit mid-season, debate club medals from tournaments he only entered because the girl he liked was on the team, a Salesman of the Month plaque from a job at a mobile phone kiosk he had held for all of 3 weeks. And photos, of course, dozens of them. Foster with that $1 million smile that could talk anyone into anything. I was the one who did his math homework. He was the one who charmed Mrs. Albright into giving him an A for it anyway. That was our dynamic. He was the handsome chassis, and I was the unseen, overworked engine that made it go. It was while I was holding a photo of him, beaming in a cap and gown I knew he barely earned, that my eyes caught the envelope again. It was sitting on the old card table I had set up, stark white against the dusty wood. It had come in that day's mail, certified. The return address was for Meridian Capital Bank. Never heard of them. I had figured it was just an aggressive refi offer, the kind of junk mail that preys on the recently bereaved. But it had been nagging at me all afternoon. A little statistical anomaly I couldn't ignore, a loose data point. I slid it open with the edge of a ruler. The letterhead was heavy, expensive. The words were dense, legal, but a few jumped out like signal flares in a fog. Notice of delinquency, acceleration clause, and the one that made the air go thin and cold. Foreclosure proceedings. This had to be a mistake. A scam. I pay my bills on time, always. It is what I do. I have a color-coded spreadsheet that tracks every dollar that comes in and every dollar that goes out. This property, our family home on Maple Grove Lane, was secure. The original mortgage was paid off a decade ago. It was the one asset, the one piece of solid ground left after our parents were gone. I pulled out my phone, my heart starting to thud a low, heavy rhythm against my ribs. My fingers felt clumsy on the screen. I navigated the automated phone tree from hell, finally getting to a loan officer named Brenda who sounded like she was on her 4th cup of coffee and her last nerve. "Yes, Mr. Taylor," Brenda affirmed, her voice flat. "I am showing an active second mortgage on the property at 1421 Maple Grove Lane. The account is 90 days past due." "That is impossible," I protested, my own voice sounding distant, like it was coming from the other end of a long tunnel. "There is no second mortgage. I am the executor of the estate. I would know." A pause, the clicking of a keyboard, loud and aggressive in the sudden silence of the attic. "Sir, I am looking right at it. A home equity line of credit. Opened 6 months ago. The disbursement was for $250,000. The number just hung there in the air. $250,000. The total equity of my parents' entire life liquidated in a single transaction. "Who authorized that?" I whispered, the words catching in my throat. More clicking, Brenda let out an annoyed sigh. "Sir, I am just looking at the file. The paperwork was co-signed by the estate's executor and Anderson Taylor, and a Foster Walsh." My blood ran cold. My signature is my bond, my word. I have spent my entire life making sure it only ever goes on documents I have read, analyzed, and understood completely. Foster would sign anything if it got him what he wanted 5 minutes faster. But my name. "That can't be right," I insisted. The only thing Foster and I have co-signed recently was a small business loan for our furniture company. My mind flashed back 3 months. Foster sitting across from me at the kitchen table in this very house. He was electric with enthusiasm, his hands waving as he painted a picture of their future. It was his new venture, Artisan Oak Creations. He pitched it as a way to honor our father, a man who found peace in a cloud of sawdust and the smell of wood varnish. "It is not just a business, Andy," he had said, his voice full of that earnest charm he could turn on like a faucet. "It is a legacy. We will make bespoke pieces, high-end, our dad's designs. It will keep his memory alive. It will keep this house in the family forever." I was skeptical. I am always skeptical. Foster's business ideas usually had the shelf life of fresh milk, but we had just lost our parents. I was raw. I wanted to believe in him. I wanted us to have something to build together. So I did what I do. I assessed the risk. I drafted a rock-solid partnership agreement. I personally secured a small, manageable $10,000 business loan, leveraging it against the estate in a way that was controlled, limited, and fully documented. $10,000, not $250,000. "Sir," Brenda's voice cut through my thoughts, pulling me back to the present. "I can email you a copy of the loan agreement we have on file." "Please do," I managed, my voice hoarse. I ended the call, my hand shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. The email arrived a moment later. I tapped it open. And there it was, a loan document from Meridian Capital Bank, and at the bottom 2 signatures, Foster's, a flamboyant, confident scrawl, and mine, except it wasn't. It was close. It was a damn good forgery, I will give him that. He must have practiced. But the loop on the A was too round. The cross on the T was too high. It was a sophisticated, calculated lie rendered in ink. I looked around the quiet, dusty attic. This house, the one I was trying to preserve, was now Exhibit A in a crime scene. A crime committed against me, by my own brother. Every object, every box seemed to mock me. This was supposed to be the one safe thing, the one asset that was truly secure. And suddenly it was just another variable in an equation I didn't understand. An unaccounted for risk. My mind was a white-hot panic. I started pulling things apart, not with any plan, just a desperate need to find something. An explanation, a letter, a file, anything. I tore through old filing cabinets, shoeboxes of receipts, manila envelopes full of warranties for appliances that had been replaced twice over. Nothing. My eyes landed on my mother's old sewing box, tucked under the eaves. It was a big wooden chest filled with spools of thread and half-finished quilting projects. A place of stability, of order. Mom was as meticulous as I was. On a desperate whim, I pulled it out. The top layer was just as I remembered: pincushions, measuring tape, little plastic containers of buttons. But as I lifted the main tray out, I felt it snag on something. There was a false bottom. I had never known it was there. My fingers fumbled with the edge until a small wooden panel popped loose. Inside was a small stash of emergency cash, about $3,000 in crisp $100 bills wrapped in a rubber band. Classic mom. Always have a contingency plan. But that wasn't what made my breath catch in my throat. Tucked beneath the money was a photograph. It was a glossy, professional-looking shot. Foster laughing, one arm draped around a man I had never seen before. They were on a yacht, the ocean a brilliant blue behind them. Foster was wearing a ridiculously expensive-looking watch and holding a glass of champagne. He looked like the king of the world. He was supposed to be sourcing lumber from Amish country in Pennsylvania that weekend. That is what he had told me. He had even sent me pictures of barns and woodpiles to prove it. Tucked behind the photo was one more thing: an expired high-end credit card, a platinum card, heavy and metallic. The name on it wasn't Foster's. It read Jarred Thorne, but the issuing bank was for a corporate account. A limited liability company, LLC, named Apex Global Holdings. I sat there on the dusty floor of the attic, the foreclosure notice on one side of me and a dead man's credit card on the other. My brain, the analytical engine that had been sputtering in a fog of shock and grief, finally kicked into gear. The panic receded, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. This wasn't just a bad loan. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a sophisticated, multi-layered fraud. I took the stairs down to the study, my movements precise and deliberate. I sat at my father's old desk, booted up my laptop, and started typing. Apex Global Holdings. The search results were sparse, which was a red flag in itself. A registered agent in Delaware, no public-facing website, no product, no service, a ghost, a shell corporation. Then I searched for Artisan Oak Creations. Our supposed legacy: nothing, not a single hit beyond the state business registration I had filed myself. There was no website, no workshop, no lumber, it never existed. It was just a name. A ghost story Foster had told to get my signature on a single, legitimate document, the one he had used as a stepping stone to this. My hands flew across the keyboard. I cross-referenced the name on the credit card, Jard Thorne with Apex Global Holdings. A hit. He was listed as the sole director. Another search, this time for Foster's social media. I didn't follow him, his feed of endless parties and self-congratulation was exhausting. But I knew his partner, Sage, a choreographer, documented their entire life online for public consumption. Her profile was a curated monument to unearned wealth. There was Foster, posing next to a brand new Maserati Ghibli, surprised my man with a new ride, #BossLife. There were pictures of them at the Gilded Lounge, an exclusive social club in the city with a 5-figure initiation fee. There were trips to Bali, to Milan, to St. Bart's. Timestamps on the photos lined up perfectly with the dates he was supposedly on site for Artisan Oak Creations, struggling to get our noble venture off the ground. It all clicked into place, the tumblers of the lock falling one by one. The shell company, Apex Global Holdings, was his personal slush fund. He had used the forged second mortgage to pour $250,000 of our family's equity into it. Artisan Oak Creations was the smokescreen, the perfect, sentimental cover story designed to lull me into complacency. He hadn't just lied to me. He had built an entire false reality, a Potemkin village of a business, for the sole purpose of robbing me blind. He had sold our parents' memory, our home, our future for a sports car and a fancy club membership. I leaned back in the old leather chair, the springs groaning in the quiet house. The shock was gone. The grief was gone. In their place was a cold, hard certainty. I am an actuary. My entire world is built on a simple, brutal truth: the ledger must be balanced. Every debit must have a corresponding credit. Every liability must be accounted for. Foster had just created the single largest liability of his life. He saw me as the boring, predictable brother, the human calculator, too cautious to ever take a real risk, too bland to ever achieve what he could. He was about to find out that the man who spends his life calculating the precise financial cost of a catastrophe is the last person you want to create a catastrophe for. He had no idea what a meticulous, thorough, and legally compliant audit of his entire existence was about to befall him. I looked at the foreclosure notice, the photograph, the fake credit card, and the emergency cash from my mother. It wasn't much to start with, but it was enough. The audit of my own life was over. The forensic audit of Foster Walsh was about to begin, and I would not stop until the books were balanced down to the last goddamn penny. Before you declare war, you have to do a threat assessment. You have to understand the enemy, not just their current position, but their history, their tactics, their predictable patterns of behavior. I had spent 35 years observing my brother, but I had never really analyzed him as a hostile actor. I had always classified him as a familial obligation, a known liability that you just sort of price into your life. Now, sitting in the silence of my father's study at 2 a.m, with the ghost of a foreclosure hanging over my head, I was rerunning the data. In one memory, one specific data point from about 3 years ago kept flashing in my mind like a statistical outlier that changes the outcome of the entire model. It was a Tuesday night. I was decompressing from a particularly brutal day of analyzing storm surge probabilities, and by way of relaxation, I was rebalancing my investment portfolio, which is, I admit, the most actuary sentence ever written. My phone buzzed. It was Foster. He never called me on a weeknight unless he was standing in a burning building of his own creation, holding a gasoline can. "Andy, hey, you busy?" He sounded breathless, his voice tight with a kind of high-pitched panic he usually reserved for when his favorite sports team was about to blow a lead. "Just finishing up some things. What is wrong?" "Nothing is wrong," he waved a dismissive hand way too quickly. "Everything is great. It is just, that big OmniCorp logistics presentation I have been working on for Sterling Stratagems." I knew of it. He had been talking about nothing else for weeks. It was his first major project since landing the management consultant gig. According to him, he was single-handedly revolutionizing their entire supply chain with his synergistic paradigm shifts and proactive value-added frameworks. I don't think he even knew what those words meant, but they sounded great coming out of his mouth with that $1 million smile. "It is tomorrow morning," he said, 9 anti-meridian, in front of the entire executive board. Marcus Blackwood, the senior partner, is flying in just for it. I raised an eyebrow. Okay, so you are prepared, already knowing the answer. A long, painful silence, then a cracked whisper, Andy, I am so screwed. An hour later, I was standing in the doorway of his downtown apartment, a monument to aspirational living. The rent must have been astronomical, a calculated risk taken on the assumption of a future he hadn't earned yet. It had all the right pieces: the exposed brick, the stainless steel appliances, the abstract art that looked like a paint factory had exploded. But up close, you could see the cracks. The Eames chair was a knockoff from Wayfair. The bookshelf was filled with books that had clearly never been opened, their spines perfectly uncreased. It was a stage, and he was the lead actor. Foster was packing in front of a massive flat-screen TV displaying a spreadsheet that looked like a Jackson Pollock painting. He hadn't slept. His hair was a mess, his expensive shirt was untucked, and the air smelled of stale coffee and pure terror. He was muttering, running his hands through his hair. I don't get it, the numbers just won't number. I put my laptop bag and a thermos of black coffee on his polished concrete countertop. Walk me through it. For the next 20 minutes, he tried to explain. It was a torrent of buzzwords and corporate jargon that all boiled down to one simple, immutable fact. He had been tasked with building a predictive model for OmniCorp's shipping logistics, and he had absolutely no idea how to do it. He had spent a month charming the clients, having long strategy lunches, and designing a killer PowerPoint template. He had left the actual work, the math, for the last night. I sat down at his dining table and had him send me the file. It was worse than I could have imagined. It was a crime scene of bad data. He had columns of mismatched units, text fields where there should have been numerical values, and formulas that referenced cells that didn't exist. He had tried to run a regression analysis using customer satisfaction scores as the primary variable for predicting shipping container turnover. It was the statistical equivalent of trying to predict the weather using horoscopes. I kept my voice level. Foster, this data is unusable. It is not even clean. Where did you pull this from? Their internal servers, Foster insisted defensively. I downloaded everything from the project folder they gave me. Did you validate it? Did you scrub it for errors? He just stared at me blankly. That was a no. He had just dumped a raw data feed into Excel and expected magic to happen. He was a chef who had thrown a live cow, a bag of flour, and a tomato into an oven and was somehow surprised it didn't come out as a lasagna. I took a long, slow sip of my coffee. The presentation is in 8 hours. I know, he wailed, slumping onto his designer sofa. My career is over. Blackwood is going to fire me in front of everyone. They will laugh me out of the building. I looked at my brother, this golden child who had glided through life on a cushion of charm and other people's hard work, and I saw a scared kid. It was a look I had seen a dozen times before, the night before his SATs, the time he forgot to pay his rent for 2 months, the time he crashed our dad's car. It always ended the same way, with him panicking and me quietly, methodically cleaning up the mess. I pointed to his chair. Move, get me the login credentials for OmniCorp server and make more coffee. For the next 7 hours, the world shrank to the glowing screen of my laptop. Foster's apartment faded away. There was only the data. I worked like a surgeon in an emergency room. First, triage. I isolated the core datasets that mattered: port arrivals, customs clearance times, freight tonnage, transit costs. I wrote macros to scrub the garbage data, to standardize formats, to purge the thousands of duplicate and corrupted entries. It was painstaking, meticulous work. The kind of work I was built for. Foster, meanwhile, proved to be an excellent source of unhelpful commentary. Peering over my shoulder, Foster asked, shouldn't that be a pie chart? No, Foster, you don't use a pie chart to show a time series analysis. What if we made the colors more dynamic, more punchy? We will worry about the color palette after we have established a statistically significant correlation, okay? Around 4 anti-meridian, he finally crashed, collapsing onto the sofa and falling into a dead sleep, snoring softly while I rebuilt his career from the ground up. The sun was just starting to tint the sky a dirty gray when I finished. It was, if I do say so myself, a thing of beauty. I had built a new model from scratch, a multivariable regression that not only accurately tracked their past performance but could predict, with a 92% confidence interval, the peak demand periods for the next 3 fiscal quarters. I had identified 3 key inefficiencies in their Pacific shipping lane that were costing them nearly $7 million a year. And I had translated all of it into a series of clean, clear, and brutally effective charts and graphs. It was a story told in numbers, and it was a story that would make whoever presented it look like a goddamn genius. I nudged Foster awake. He blinked at me bleary-eyed. My voice rough from exhaustion, I told him, "It is done." I spent the next 45 minutes walking him through it, slide by slide. I was like a mission controller briefing an astronaut who had slept through all his training. I explained what each chart meant. I told him which key phrases to use. I pointed out the specific data points that would make the executives sit up and listen. I practically wrote a script for him. He just nodded, his eyes slowly gaining focus as he realized what I was handing him. It was a winning lottery ticket. "Wow," he murmured, scrolling through the slides. This looks incredible. It looks like I did it." He laughed, a shaky sound. "I mean, like I meant to do it. I just packed up my laptop. Just remember the point on slide 12 about the demurrage fees. That is the $7 million number. Lead with that." He nodded quickly. "Right, demurrage fees, got it." He was already starting to straighten his tie, the panic replaced by a burgeoning, unearned confidence. He was slipping into character. I let myself out of his apartment as he was practicing his power poses in the reflection of the TV screen. I went home, took a shower, and went to my own job at Commonwealth Surety Group, where I spent the day calculating the financial risk of commercial boiler failures. It was just another Tuesday. Around noon, I got a text. It was from Foster. "Killed it. They loved me. Blackwood WANTS to take me to lunch at the Capitol Club." I texted back, "Congratulations." An hour later, an email landed in my inbox. Foster had forwarded a company-wide announcement from Marcus Blackwood. The subject line was, "New Standard of Excellence on the OmniCorp account." The body of the email was nauseating. It praised Foster Walsh's unprecedented analytical acumen and paradigm-shifting insights. It lauded his innate ability to distill complex data into actionable strategic imperatives. It announced that Mr. Walsh was being given a bonus and would be heading up the next phase of the project implementation. My project, my $7 million discovery. At the very top of the forwarded message, Foster had added a single line. "Couldn't have done it without you, bro. Drinks on me soon." We never got those drinks. A few days later, Marigold Bailey, our former nanny, called me. She had heard the news, probably from Foster himself, who had no doubt spun the tale of his heroic, single-handed triumph. "Anderson, honey, I just heard about Foster," she gushed, her voice overflowing with pride. "He is just so brilliant, that boy, a real genius with business. You must be so proud of your little brother." I stared at a spreadsheet of mortality tables. "Yeah, Marigold," I replied. "I am very proud. What else could I say? If I told the truth, I would sound bitter, jealous, petty. It was the perfect crime." He had a whole network of enablers, people like Marigold, who were so invested in the myth of the golden child that they couldn't see the truth. He had weaponized their affection. My affection. That memory faded and I was back in the study. The foreclosure notice, the forged signature, the photo of him on the yacht. It wasn't a different playbook. It was the same one, just with more zeros at the end. The OmniCorp presentation was him stealing my work for a bonus and a pat on the back. This was him stealing our home, our legacy, for a Maserati and a membership at the Gilded Lounge. The scale was different, but the methodology was identical. Lie, charm, take, and leave me to clean up the mess and swallow the truth. But this time, the mess was my own life. And this time, I wasn't going to clean it up for him. I was going to document it, every dirty receipt, every fraudulent transaction, every single lie. The cold, sharp clarity I had felt in the attic returned, settling deep in my bones. It wasn't anger anymore. Anger is a hot, inefficient emotion. This was colder. It was the dispassionate resolve of an auditor who has just found a catastrophic error and knows he cannot rest until the books are balanced. I stood up and walked back to the attic, my steps sure and steady. I retrieved the false bottom from my mother's sewing box. I took the $3,000 in emergency cash. This wasn't a gift from a dead parent anymore. It was seed money, my first round of funding for a new, very personal project. Back in the study, I opened my laptop. I didn't open a Word document. I opened a fresh, clean, empty spreadsheet. I saved the file to a new encrypted drive, a digital black box. I named the file Ledger of Ruin. I created the first few column headers: date, item, category, evidence file, amount, notes. In the first row, under amount, I typed $3,000. Under category, I typed initial capitalization. Under notes, I wrote, contingency funds from M. Taylor, to be used for forensic accounting, data recovery, and legal filing fees. Then I created a new line item. Fraudulent loan, Meridian Capital Bank. Under amount, I entered $250,000. Under evidence file, I typed foreclosure notice.pdf. My hands moved quickly across the keyboard, a lifetime of meticulous data entry culminating in this single, grim task. I was building my case. I was quantifying his sin. When the ledger was established, I picked up my phone. I scrolled through my contacts, past Foster's name, until I found the person I needed, Ivy Garza. We had met running a charity 10K a few years back and had stayed friendly. She was a court reporter. She lived and breathed the bureaucratic machinery of the justice system. She was my procedural ally. She answered on the second ring, her voice a little sleepy. Hey Ivy, it is Anderson Taylor. Sorry to call so late. Anderson, no worries, everything okay, you sound serious. I looked at the ledger on my screen, at the $250,000 liability that bore my brother's name. The words feeling solid and true for the first time all night, I said, yeah, I am okay. Listen, I need to ask you a question about public records requests. It is complicated. Ivy picked up on the second ring, her voice thick with sleep. This better be a 5-alarm fire or a fresh pot of coffee, Taylor. Sorry, Ivy, I know it is late. I was packing the length of my father's study, the worn oriental rug doing nothing to soften my heavy footsteps. I will buy you coffee for a week, I need some information. Official Anderson voice, this is serious. The fog cleared from her voice. What is up? I gave her the 30,000-foot view, a potential signature forgery, a questionable loan, an LLC I had never heard of tied to our family home. I kept my voice as level and dispassionate as if I were describing a new insurance product, but my heart was hammering against my ribs. Whoa, she breathed softly after I was done. There was a rustling sound like she was sitting up in bed. Okay, first thing, Andy, and I mean this, I am a court reporter. I type what people say in a courtroom. I am not a lawyer. I can't give you legal advice. I know, I insisted. I am not asking for advice. I am asking for the instruction manual. I feel like I am trying to assemble a piece of IKEA furniture in the dark and I don't know where the Allen key is. She laughed, a short, sharp sound. Okay, the Allen key. I can do that. You need a paper trail, not just the stuff you have, but the official stuff the kind a judge looks at, certified copies. You want to see every document filed against that property? You file a public records request with the Arlington County Clerk's Office. Form 12A, Request for Real Property Records. You will get a copy of every deed, every lien, every mortgage instrument attached to that address. I was already typing, creating a new tab in my ledger of ruin. Form 12A, County Clerk, got it. You want to know who is behind Apex Global Holdings? Ivy pressed, the words coming faster now. That LLC is a creature of the state. It has to be registered. You file a request with the Secretary of State's office. They will give you the articles of organization, the registered agent, the whole 9 yards. Think of me as your friendly, over-caffeinated librarian for the legal system. I can't write the book report for you, but I can damn sure tell you where to find the books. Ivy, this is exactly what I needed. The feeling of helplessness that had been choking me started to recede, replaced by the familiar comfort of a checklist. A plan. Just be careful, Andy, Ivy warned, her voice turning serious again. People who set up shell companies and forge signatures don't tend to react well when you start pulling on the threads. Watch your back. My whole job is watching my back, I countered. I am just used to looking for falling satellites in market downturns, not my own brother. After we hung up, I stared at my new checklist, the first concrete steps on a very long, very dark road. In my mind drifted back, recontextualizing the last 6 months not as a period of grief and rebuilding, but as the slow, methodical setting of a trap I had helped bait. It all started with such promise, or at least Foster's version of it. He had come to me 3 weeks after our parents' funeral, his eyes full of a sincerity I now realize was pure performance. We were at the kitchen table on Maple Grove Lane, the same table where I had done his algebra homework, and he had tried to convince our parents to let him get a motorcycle. He was dressed in what he called his founder costume, a sharp blazer, a t-shirt that probably cost more than my entire outfit, and perfectly distressed jeans. He laid out his vision for Artisan Oak Creations, He didn't have a business plan, of course. Foster didn't do plans, he did pitches. It was all passion and vision and buzzwords. We are not just selling furniture, Andy. We are selling a narrative, authenticity, legacy, handcrafted American heritage. He talked about targeting high net worth individuals, interior designers. He name-dropped a few local celebrities he was sure he could get as clients. I, the actuary, the human handbrake, had my doubts. Foster, Dad's hobby was making bookshelves and birdhouses. You are talking about a high-end luxury brand. The startup costs alone, the workshop, the tools, the master woodworkers we would have to hire. Details, details? He waved his hand dismissively. We start small, lean. We use Dad's old workshop in the garage to create the first few prototypes. All we need is a little seed capital to get the LLC formed, get a website up, and source some premium materials. $10,000, that is it. A small business loan against the estate. It is a no-brainer. He could see I was wavering. I was grieving. I was living in a quiet house that was suddenly too big and too empty. The idea of sawdust in the air again, of building something in our father's name, it was a powerful sedative for a morning sun. He knew exactly which levers to pull. So I agreed, but I did it my way. I spent a week building a full business plan, complete with a 5-year P&L forecast, a cash flow analysis, and a break-even chart. I wrote a partnership agreement that would make a corporate lawyer weep, outlining our roles with excruciating clarity. I would be the CFO/COO, handling all finance, operations, and compliance. He would be the CEO, in charge of sales, marketing, and vision. I secured the $10,000 loan myself from our local credit union, making sure the terms were fair and the liability was strictly contained. I did the work. I always did the work. For the first month, it felt real. I spent my nights and weekends turning our dad's dusty garage workshop into a plausible place of business. I researched and ordered a new bench saw and a top-of-the-line lathe. I spent hours on the phone with lumber suppliers in Pennsylvania and Vermont, getting quotes on black walnut and curly maple. My spreadsheet for material cost per board foot was a thing of color-coded beauty. I was building the foundation, brick by meticulous brick. Foster, meanwhile, was networking. This mostly involved having expensive lunches at places like the Gilded Lounge and posting inspirational quotes about entrepreneurship on his LinkedIn profile. He designed a logo, which to his credit was actually very good. He hired a freelance web designer to build a slick, minimalist website that was perpetually coming soon. He was building the facade. The shift started about 2 months in. It was subtle at first. He started having more and more important calls that he had to take on the patio, his voice a low, urgent murmur. When I would ask who it was, he would be vague. Just some money guys exploring our Series A potential. Foster, we haven't even sold a single cutting board. We are not ready for a Series A. You have got to think big to get big, Andy. He tapped his temple. Let me handle the capital strategy. You keep being the best damn numbers guy in the business. It was a backhanded compliment and a dismissal all in one. A classic Foster maneuver. Keep the engine humming, but don't let it ask what is under the hood. I remember one Saturday afternoon vividly. I was in the garage, covered in sawdust, trying to calibrate the new belt sander. Foster came in, smelling of expensive cologne and looking agitated. He was on his phone, packing back and forth. No, the asset is clean, he was saying, his voice sharp. The title is unencumbered. We have the executor's full cooperation. It is a formality. He saw me looking and quickly ended the call. Who was that? I questioned, shutting off the sander. Just a lender, he replied a little too casually. A private equity group, they play hardball. I am trying to set up a better credit facility for us. The $10,000 you got is great for lumber, but to really scale, we need a real line of credit. I am telling them about the house. My blood ran cold. What about the house? As collateral, he stated, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. It is our biggest asset. We can leverage the equity to get a massive credit line at a prime rate. It is just business, Andy. Absolutely not, I declared, my voice firm. The house is off limits. That was the first rule. It is in the partnership agreement I wrote, Foster. Article 4, Section 3B, no leveraging of non-liquid estate assets without unanimous written consent. Did you read it? He had the grace to look a little sheepish. I skimmed it. Look, you are right. I was just spitballing with them, playing hard to get. Don't worry, your precious house is safe. I will handle it. He clapped me on the shoulder, the picture of reassuring confidence. Now, how are my prototypes coming along? He was a master of misdirection. He had created a fire, let me put it out and make me feel like I had won, all while he had a much larger, much more destructive arson plan for the other side of town. That conversation wasn't him spitballing. It was a fact-finding mission. He was probing my defenses, seeing what I knew, what my hard lines were. He learned my signature was required, that I was paying close attention to that specific risk. So he found a way around it, forgery. Around that same time, Marigold Bailey called me. "Anderson, honey, I was just talking to Foster," she chirped. "He told me all about his big plans for the furniture company. It is so wonderful that he is taking charge like this, being the man of the family. His father would be so proud." "He has got a lot of ambition, Marigold." The words tasted like ash in my mouth. "Well, he gets that from your mother's side," Marigold laughed. "You make sure you support him, you hear? He is the ideas man, and you have always been so good with the details." The world saw it, everyone saw it. He was the star, I was the stagehand. He was the visionary CEO, I was the guy in the back room with the calculator. Foster didn't just tolerate this dynamic, he cultivated it. He weaponized it. He used everyone's perception of us to build a shield of plausible deniability around his fraud. Who would ever suspect the charming golden child of something so cold, so criminal? They would be much more likely to believe I was the jealous, bitter brother trying to tear him down. The final piece of the trap was laid about 3 months ago. I was working late in the study, paying the quarterly property taxes online. Foster walked in, holding a small stack of papers and a pen. "Hey, man of the hour," he greeted with a grin. "Got some boring LLC stuff for you to sign. Annual registration, state compliance forms, the usual red tape. I filled it all out for you." I took the stack. I am an actuary. I read the fine print. I read the fine print on cereal boxes. I read everything. The documents looked legitimate. Standard Delaware corporate filings for Artisan Oak Creations, LLC. A form for establishing a business banking account, which I knew we needed. It was all there. I read every line. It was tedious, but it was clean. I signed them, 4 signatures, 1 on each document. My clean, clear, legible signature, Anderson Taylor. Now sitting here in the dead of night, I can see it with perfect, horrifying clarity. He never filed those papers. He didn't need them. He only needed one thing, a fresh, high-quality sample of my signature. 4 of them, in fact, enough for a scanner to pick up every nuance, every pen stroke. Enough for a skilled forger, or more likely a sophisticated software program, to create a perfect, scalable digital replica. A key, forged to open a lock worth $250,000. While I was in the garage pricing out wood stains, he was in this very room, using my trust as a tool to rob me. While I was building spreadsheets to project our path to profitability, he was booking flights to Bali with my money, with our parents' legacy. Every reassuring word, every brotherly clap on the shoulder was a lie. A calculated move in a long, predatory game. I looked back at my laptop screen at the ledger of ruin. The 2-line items, the $3,000 in seed money and the $250,000 in fraudulent debt, stared back at me. This wasn't just a spreadsheet. It was a declaration of war. A war Foster had started 6 months ago without my even knowing I was a combatant. But I knew now. He thought he was the strategist, the big-picture guy. He was about to learn a very hard lesson about what happens when you turn a risk analyst into your primary liability. He thought the game was over. But I was just finishing the preliminary audit. The real work, the 1,000-page, fully sourced, cross-referenced forensic analysis of his entire life, was just about to begin. I saved my file, shut the laptop, and listened to the quiet hum of the old house. It was the only thing I had left to fight for, and I would not lose. The first rule of forensic accounting is to follow the money. Not where it is supposed to be, but where it actually went. My mother's emergency cash, $3,000 that smelled faintly of cedar and mothballs, was sitting in a neat stack on my father's desk. My seed money. Before I spent a single dollar of it, I needed to establish a baseline. I needed to see the initial crime scene, the account for Artisan Oak Creations. I had set it up myself at our local Arlington credit union. A simple business checking account linked to the $10,000 loan. The login credentials were saved in my encrypted password manager, a string of 16 alphanumeric characters that only I knew. I navigated to the credit union's clunky online banking portal, the interface a painful reminder of 2005-era web design, and typed in my credentials. My plan was to download every monthly statement, every transaction record, and import it into my ledger of ruin. I expected to see the initial deposit, a few debits for the tools I had ordered, and a remaining balance of around $7,000. That was the logical, predictable state of the account. The page loaded. My eyes went straight to the big, bold number at the top of the screen. Current balance 0. I blinked. I must have misread it. I refreshed the page. Current balance 0. My heart, which had been beating with a steady, analytical rhythm, gave a painful lurch. It was like looking at a vital signs monitor and seeing a flat line. 0 was an impossibility. It didn't compute. There were no outstanding checks, no pending debits. The tools had already been paid for. I clicked on the Activity tab, my hand unsteady on the mouse. The transaction list was brutally short. Date April 12th, transaction deposit loan disbursement, amount $10,000. Date April 13th, transaction purchase Gresham Tools supply, amount minus $2,874.55. Date April 14th, transaction wire transfer outgoing, recipient Global Holdings, amount minus $7,125.45. There it was, the ghost, the shell corporation. Foster hadn't just used the house as his personal piggy bank. He had started with our business. He had waited for me to fund the account, waited for me to make the initial, legitimate purchases to create a facade of normal activity, and then less than 48 hours later, he had drained every last cent. He had wired our company's entire operating capital to his fraudulent slush fund. The worst part, the authorization for the wire transfer would have required 2 signatures. He must have used a second one of the signature samples he had stolen from me. This wasn't a crime of opportunity. This was a plan, a meticulous, cold-blooded plan that predated the second mortgage. He had used our father's memory as a 5-figure appetizer before moving on to the $250,000 main course. I stared at the 0 on the screen. It was the purest distillation of my brother's character I had ever seen. The absolute, definitive value of his word, of our partnership, of his love for his family. 0. The checklist from Ivy, the public records requests, the careful, patient gathering of evidence, that was the long game. But seeing that 0 flipped a switch in my brain. The dispassionate auditor was gone, and in his place was just a brother. A brother who had been played for a fool. I grabbed my keys. This required a face-to-face reconciliation. The drive to Foster's place was a study in contrasts. I left the quiet, tree-lined streets of Maple Grove Lane, with its modest, well-kept family homes, and drove 20 minutes across town to Whispering Pines Estates. It wasn't just a neighborhood, it was a lifestyle community. The houses were enormous, beige McMansions packed so close together you could probably pass a cup of sugar to your neighbor from the bathroom window. Everything was new, immaculate, and completely devoid of character. It was a place for people who had made a lot of money very quickly and wanted everyone to know it. As I turned onto a street, I had to slow down for a municipal sanitation truck. The driver, a stout man with a kind, weathered face, gave me a friendly wave as he wrestled a bin. I recognized him vaguely. Otto Jiang. I had seen him on my parents' route for years. It was a small human moment in the middle of a profoundly inhuman situation. I nodded back and drove on, parking behind a mirror-black Maserati Ghibli that squatted in Foster's driveway like a predatory insect. $70,000 of our parents' equity, right there on 4 wheels. I walked up the paverstone path and rang the bell. A moment later, the door was opened not by Foster, but by Sage Flint, his partner. She was tall, impossibly thin, and radiated an aura of bored, artistic superiority. Today she was dressed in what looked like silk pajamas that probably cost more than my car's transmission. Anderson, she said, her tone making my name sound like an unpleasant diagnosis. Foster didn't say you were coming over. Is he here, Sage? We are in the middle of a creative session, she said, gesturing vaguely behind her. He is helping me storyboard my new piece. It is about the commodification of vulnerability in a post-industrial society. Before I could respond to that particular word salad, Foster appeared behind her, a wine glass swirling in his hand. He was wearing a cashmere sweater and a look of practiced concern. Andy, what is wrong? You look terrible. We need to talk, Foster, about the business. Sage let out an audible sigh. Can this wait? We are having a breakthrough. No, I said, my voice flat and cold. It cannot wait. Foster's smile didn't falter. He gestured expansively towards the living room. Of course, come on in, don't mind the mess. The mess was a few dozen glossy photos spread across a marble coffee table, each one a dramatic shot of Sage looking tortured in a warehouse somewhere. He turned to Sage. Sage, honey, why don't you make us some coffee, the good stuff? the single origin beans. She shot me a look that could curdle milk and drifted off towards the kitchen, a monument of resentful grace. I didn't sit down. I stood in the middle of his cavernous living room with its 20-foot ceilings and its generic gray furniture, and I waited for him to turn around. "So," he said, taking a sip of his wine, "what is the emergency? Did the price of wood glue go up?" I didn't rise to the bait. I looked at the Artisan Oak Creations bank account this morning, Foster. He nodded slowly, his expression unreadable, and the balance is zero. You wired $7,125.45 to a company called Apex Global Holdings on April 14th. I would like to know why our startup capital was transferred to a Delaware shell corporation. He stared at me for a long moment. I expected him to feign shock, to invent a story about a mistaken transfer, a banking error, to do anything but what he did next. He smiled, a slow, condescending smile. "Wow," he said, shaking his head. "You really are good with the details, aren't you? Down to the penny. Don't play games with me." "It wasn't a game, Andy, it was a pivot," he said, the buzzword rolling off his tongue with practiced ease. Artisan Oak was a beautiful idea, a real passion project, but the market analysis just wasn't there. The overhead was too high, the timeline to profitability too long. It was a sentimental investment. Apex is a strategic one. It has a much more aggressive growth profile. I felt a dizzying sense of unreality. He was pitching me. He was standing in his stolen house, drinking stolen wine, pitching the company he used to steal from me. Apex isn't a company, Foster. It is a mailbox in Wilmington. It is a slush fund you are financing with a fraudulent second mortgage on our family home, a mortgage you took out by forging my signature. I laid the foreclosure notice on his stupid marble table. He glanced at it, then back at me, his expression unchanged. "Forgery is such an ugly word." Foster's voice remained unnervingly calm. "I prefer executive authorization. You were getting bogged down in the minutiae, Andy. You were spending weeks analyzing the tensile strength of different woods when we needed to be making bold moves. You are a risk analyst. I am a risk taker. That is the difference between us." "The difference between us," I said, my voice dangerously low, "is that I don't steal from my own family. You have saddled this estate with $250,000 of debt that is due now. The bank is foreclosing on Mom and Dad's house." At that moment, Sage returned, holding 2 delicate espresso cups. "What is he talking about, baby?" she asked, her eyes wide. "Foreclosing." Foster put his arm around her, pulling her close. "It is nothing, honey. It is just a procedural issue. Anderson is getting worked up over some boring paperwork. He doesn't see the big picture." "I see a picture of you on a yacht, Foster," I shot back, my control finally cracking. "I see a new Maserati in the driveway and a membership at the Gilded Lounge. That is the big picture, isn't it? You sold our home for a lifestyle." Sage looked from me to Foster, her brow furrowed in confusion. What is he talking about? And then Foster delivered the killing blow, the move that wasn't just criminal but cruel, the rug pull. "Andy," he said, his voice now full of a sickening, theatrical pity, "I knew this would be hard for you to understand. You are emotional right now, grieving. You are not thinking clearly." He reached into a drawer in the console table beside him and pulled out a document. He slid it across the table next to the foreclosure notice. "That is why I had to take protective measures." I looked down at it. It was a legal document stamped by the county court. Petition for emergency temporary executorship. It cited my emotional distress and financial mismanagement, citing the $10,000 business loan I had taken out as a reckless endangerment of the estate. It was full of lies, all wrapped in dense legalese. And at the bottom, a judge's signature, granting him temporary, sole control over the estate's assets, pending a hearing I had never been notified about. The petition was supported by a signed declaration, a witness statement attesting to my unstable behavior. It was from Marigold Bailey. You went to Marigold?" I whispered, the words catching in my throat. "You twisted her love for us and used it against me." "I told her I was worried about you," Foster said, his voice dripping with false sincerity. "That the stress of managing the estate was getting to be too much, that you were making rash decisions. She just wants what is best for you, Andy, for the family." He had poisoned the well. He had not only stolen the money and the house, but he had stolen the narrative. In the eyes of the world, in the eyes of the people who had known us our whole lives, he was the responsible son, stepping in to save the family from his unstable, grieving brother. I was locked out, not just from the bank accounts, but from the truth itself. "So that is it," I said, my voice hollow. "You just take everything." "I am not taking anything," he said, the lie coming as easily as breathing. "I am protecting our assets. I am making them work for us. You should thank me." I just stared at him, at this stranger wearing my brother's face. The charming, lazy, corner-cutting boy I knew had evolved into something else entirely. A predator. I turned and walked towards the door, my legs feeling like lead. I had nothing else to say. He had all the angles covered. "Oh, and Andy," he called after me. I stopped, my hand on the doorknob, but didn't turn around. "I had the locks changed on the garage workshop at the house. I can't have you in there messing with the inventory. It is an asset of the new company now." He was locking me out of my own father's workshop. He was seizing the last physical piece of my dad's memory and classifying it as a corporate asset. "You can't do this," I said, my voice barely audible. "I already did." His voice held a dismissive finality. "Go balance a spreadsheet or whatever it is you do. Leave the real world to me." I walked out into the bright, unforgiving sunlight of Whispering Pines Estates. I got in my sensible, paid-for sedan. As I drove away, I saw Sage through the big picture window, laughing at something Foster had said, her hand on his chest. They looked happy, successful. They looked like they had won. I drove back to Maple Grove Lane in a daze. The world felt muffled, distant. I walked into the empty house, into my father's study. I sat down in front of my laptop and opened the ledger of ruin. I created a new line item. Date today, item familial trust value, category intangible asset, evidence file not applicable, amount 0. Under the notes column, I typed, asset value fully depreciated, total catastrophic loss recorded. The shock had worn off. The humiliation was fading. The grief was a distant echo. All that was left was the cold, hard math of the ledger. He had taken everything. He had balanced his life by unbalancing mine. He thought he had won. He thought I would crumble. He still saw me as the boring, predictable brother, the human calculator. He was right about one thing. I am a human calculator, and I was about to calculate the precise, total, and unavoidable cost of his ruin. The books were unbalanced, but they wouldn't be for long. That drive back from Whispering Pines Estates was the longest 20 minutes of my life. The world outside my windshield seemed to have muted itself. The colors were washed out, the sounds were distant. I felt like I was encased in a thick block of ice, moving through a world that was no longer mine. He had taken everything, not just the money, not just the house. He had taken the story. He had stolen my own history and rewritten it with me as the villain. I pulled into the driveway on Maple Grove Lane. The house looked the same. The azalea bushes my mother had planted were just starting to bud. The big oak tree my dad used to threaten to cut down every autumn was dropping its first leaves onto the lawn. It was a perfect picture of stability, a snapshot of a life I no longer had access to. He had said he changed the locks on the garage. On my dad's workshop, I had to know. My feet felt heavy on the pavement as I walked around the side of the house. The air was cool, carrying the first hints of fall. The side door to the garage was a plain, white metal door peeling slightly at the edges. I had a key to it on my ring, a brass key worn smooth from decades of use by my father and then by me. I slid it into the lock. It went in, but it wouldn't turn. I jiggled it. Nothing. I tried again, pushing harder as if sheer force of will could make the tumblers align. The key just stopped, hitting a hard metallic wall. It was a dead end. I leaned my forehead against the cool metal of the door. Inside that garage were my father's tools, his old workbench stained with 100 different projects, the half-finished birdhouse I had been fiddling with last week. The smell of sawdust and varnish, the last tangible piece of him, and my brother had put a deadbolt between me and it, classifying it as a corporate asset. It was a violation so profound, so personal, it went beyond money. It was soul theft. I walked back inside the house, the silence pressing in on me. I went to my father's study, my sanctuary, but it felt contaminated now. This was where Foster had sat, all smiles and sincerity, and got me to sign the papers that gave him the perfect copy of my signature. This room was part of the crime scene. I sat down at the desk and did the only thing I knew how to do when the world stopped making sense. I ran the numbers. I opened my personal banking app. My checking account had a little over $4,000 in it. My savings account, my emergency fund that was supposed to last 6 months, had $22,000. My 401k, my meticulously managed retirement account, was healthy, but to touch it would mean incurring massive penalties. It was a last resort, a financial nuclear option. All told, I had about $26,000 of liquid cash to my name. It sounded like a lot until you started to list the liabilities. The foreclosure notice from Meridian Capital Bank was for $250,000, plus interest and penalties. To stop the foreclosure, I would need a lawyer. A good one. A retainer for a decent financial litigation attorney in Arlington would be $10,000, maybe $15,000, just to get them to answer my phone calls. And that was just the start. The fight could take months, years. It could easily cost $50,000 or $100,000 in legal fees. I was looking at a financial checkmate. I didn't have the resources to fight him the conventional way. He knew that. It was part of his risk assessment. He had calculated that I couldn't afford to fight back, and he had leveraged that certainty. He had priced my ruin into his business plan. And then there was the petition, the emergency temporary executorship. It meant he controlled the estate's finances completely. He could pay his own lawyers with my parents' money. He could bleed the estate dry to defend his theft of the estate. It was a perfect, diabolical feedback loop. He had financed his war against me with my own inheritance. The $3,000 from my mother's sewing box, still sitting on the corner of the desk, seemed to mock me. It was a pittance. It was like trying to put out a forest fire with a water pistol. I leaned back in the chair, the old leather groaning, and closed my eyes. Despair is a physical thing. It is a weight. It presses down on your chest and makes it hard to breathe. It whispers in your ear that you have already lost. No, I couldn't let that happen. There had to be a way to fight the narrative. I had to talk to Marigold. She was the key. She had known me my whole life. She had bandaged my knees and read me bedtime stories. If I could just make her understand what Foster had done, she would retract her statement. She had to. I found her number in my phone and pressed call, my thumb hovering over the button for a long moment. My heart was pounding. This felt more important than any conversation I had ever had. She answered with the same warm, sing-song voice she had had for 30 years. "Anderson, honey, I was just thinking about you." "Hey, Marigold." I gripped the phone, trying to keep my voice steady. "Oh, that sweet boy." I could already hear the wall going up in her tone. "He called me yesterday, you know. He is so worried about you. He told me you are not taking your parents' passing well at all." "Marigold, that is not what is happening." My words came out in a rush. "He is lying to you. He stole money, a lot of money. He forged my signature on a loan document and took out a second mortgage on the house. He is trying to steal everything." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When she spoke again, her voice was laced with a gentle, condescending pity that was 1,000 times worse than anger. "Oh, honey, listen to yourself. You sound so stressed. Your brother explained everything to me. He said you got involved in some kind of business deal that went bad and you are lashing out because you are embarrassed. It is okay. Everyone makes mistakes with money." "It wasn't a mistake," I nearly shouted, then forced myself to take a breath. "It was a crime. He used a shell company called Apex Global Holdings. He took the money for himself. He filed a petition with the court using a statement from you to get control of the estate. He told me it was a protective measure." Her voice was firm now. "He said you were going to lose the house with your investments and he had to step in and be the responsible one. Anderson, I know you two have always been competitive, but this is not the time. Your parents would want you to stick together." "Marigold, please," I begged, my voice cracking. "You have to listen to me. He tricked you. He is twisting everything." "What I know," she declared, her tone final, "is that Foster came to me with tears in his eyes and said he was scared of losing his brother and his family home. You are calling me and making wild accusations about forgeries and shell companies. Family is more important than money, Anderson. I think you need to apologize to your brother and let him help you." I didn't have an answer for that. The logic was so twisted, so perfectly inverted that it was unassailable. He had preemptively framed my truth as a symptom of my instability. Any evidence I presented would just be more proof of my lashing out. "I see," my voice felt hollow. "Thanks for your time, Marigold." I hung up the phone and stared at it. That was it. I had no allies. I was alone on an island and the tide was coming in. The despair I had been holding at bay came crashing over me. I put my head in my hands. The weight was crushing me. He had won. He had truly, completely won. I don't know how long I sat there, 10 minutes, an hour. The sun started to go down, painting the study in long, orange stripes of light. My phone buzzed on the desk. It was a text from an old college buddy. Poker night at my place Friday, 8 post-meridian, the usual crew. The usual crew, that included my friend Theodore Lee, Theo. I hadn't seen him in a few months. He ran a computer repair and data recovery shop over in Clarendon called Tech Revival Solutions. Theo was different. He wasn't part of the family friend circle that Foster had so thoroughly poisoned. Theo didn't operate on feelings or narratives. He operated on logic, on data, on the clean, binary world of ones and zeros. A tiny flicker of an idea, not quite hope, but something like it, sparked in the back of my mind. I wasn't going to call him and cry on his shoulder. I wasn't going to sound like a lunatic ranting about forgeries. I was going to present him with a problem, a data problem. I picked up the phone and dialed his number. Tech Revival, this is Theo. His voice was exactly as I remembered it, calm, a little bit nerdy, and straight to the point. Hey Theo, it is Anderson Taylor. Andy, man, long time no see. You coming to poker on Friday? I am ready to take more of your money. I don't know about poker, I confessed, but I might have some business for you. I have got a weird situation, a technical problem. My favorite kind, hit me. Okay, I chose my words carefully, keeping them as clinical as possible. There is a shared family cloud account, a standard consumer-grade thing. I have a suspicion that files have been deleted from it, and I need to know if there is a way to see an activity log. Who logged in, from what IP address, what actions were taken. Legally, of course, I have full administrative access. Child's Play, Theo assured me. Most of those services keep logs going back at least 90 days. If you are an admin, you can pull a full audit trail. It will show you every login, every upload, every download, every deletion, timestamped and tied to an IP. What else? The flicker of an idea grew brighter. I also found a digital photograph. I need to know everything I can about it. When it was taken, where it was taken, what kind of device was used. You want the EXIF data? A note of excitement entered his voice. Exchangeable image file format. It is the metadata embedded in the image file. Assuming it hasn't been scrubbed, it can give you the camera model, shutter speed, aperture, and if the device had location services turned on, the exact GPS coordinates where the photo was snapped. It is a digital fingerprint. I felt a surge of adrenaline, the first positive emotion I had had in 48 hours. This was a language I understood: data, evidence, fingerprints. It was a world away from Marigold's teary-eyed emotionalism. This was a world of hard facts. One last thing, I paused. I have got a pile of shredded documents. Crosscut, not strip. Can they be put back together? Depends on the quality of the shred, Theo mused. But yeah, absolutely. It is a pain in the ass, like the world's most boring jigsaw puzzle, but we have software that can help. You scan the individual strips and the program analyzes the edges, the print patterns, the paper grain. It can reassemble a document digitally. Takes time, takes processing power, but it can be done. I looked at the $3,000 on my desk. It wasn't a water pistol anymore. It was a key. It was the budget for Phase 1. Theo, I need to hire you, I stated plainly. Just a few hours to start, an initial consultation. Can I come by your shop tomorrow morning? I will bring the photo on a USB drive and whatever else I can find. You got it, man. 10 anti-meridian. And hey, Andy, everything okay? The question hung in the air. The old me, the me from 2 days ago, would have deflected. Fine, just busy, but something had shifted. No, Theo, the words came out cold and clear. Everything is not okay, but it is going to be. I hung up the phone and the despair was gone. The weight on my chest had lifted. It was replaced by a cold, sharp certainty, a purpose. I had been trying to fight Foster on his terms in a world of emotions, charm, and social manipulation. I was trying to win hearts and minds. It was a losing strategy. Marigold had proved that. So I would stop. I would fight this war on my terms now. In my world, the world of numbers, data, and irrefutable documented proof, I wouldn't try to convince anyone of anything. I would simply build a fortress of evidence so high and so strong that the truth would be undeniable. I wouldn't change the narrative. I would destroy it with facts. I turned back to my laptop and opened the Ledger of Ruin. It no longer looked like a monument to my failure. It was my project plan, my battle map. I created a new tab and named it Phase 1 Forensic Audit. I created a subtab for budget. Line item 1, Theodore Lee Tech Revival Solutions. Retainer for preliminary data forensics, 5 hours at $150 per hour. Amount, $750. Balance of initial capitalization, $2,250. Line item 2, Public Records Requests, Arlington County and Delaware Secretary of State. Filing fees estimated. Amount, $150. Balance, $2,100. I saved the file. Then I stood up and walked over to the bookshelf, pulling down a large, empty accordion file. I took my label maker, my old, reliable Dymo, and printed a fresh label in crisp black letters on a white background. I stuck it squarely on the front. It didn't say Foster or legal or revenge. It said risk assessment of ruin. The audit was officially underway, and I would not rest until every asset had been traced, every liability had been quantified, and the books, my brother's and mine, were finally, brutally balanced. The morning air in Clarendon had a crisp, autumnal bite to it. Tech Revival Solutions was tucked between a trendy coffee shop and a yoga studio, an unassuming storefront that looked like it had been there since the dial-up era. The front window was a chaotic museum of obsolete technology, a beige Macintosh classic, a tangle of multicolored SCSI cables, a stack of floppy disks. But through the glass I could see the workshop in the back, and it was a different world. It was a clean room of meticulous order, with tools mounted on pegboards and components sorted into labeled, static-free bins. It was chaos on the outside, logic on the inside. It was pure Theo. He was behind the counter, peering through a magnifying lamp at a circuit board, a soldering iron held in his hand with the delicacy of a surgeon. He looked up as the bell on the door chimed. "Andy, 10 anti-meridian on the dot," he said with a grin. "I could set my atomic clock by you, coffee." "Already had 2, I replied, setting my laptop bag on the counter. "I run on caffeine and statistical probability." "Fair enough, so what is the data emergency?" I didn't give him the whole sordid story. I didn't mention the foreclosure or Marigold's betrayal or the feeling of my father's memory being strip-mined for a down payment on a sports car. Theo didn't need the emotion. He needed the problem statement. "I am the executor of my parents' estate," I began, keeping my voice as level as a balance sheet. "I am performing a forensic audit of all digital assets. I have encountered some anomalies that require expert analysis." I slid a black USB stick across the counter. "On this drive is a single JPEG file. I need the full EXIF data, date, time, location, device, anything you can pull." Theo popped the drive into his workstation. A few clicks and a window full of raw data filled his screen. He whistled under his breath. Well, your boy Foster isn't a fan of digital privacy, is he?" He left the location data turned on. "Your photo was taken at 2:17 post-meridian on April 28th. The device was an iPhone 13 Pro Max. And the GPS coordinates." He clicked a link that opened a map. A red pin dropped onto a marina. "Put him squarely at the San Marino Yacht Club in Miami Beach, Florida." April 28th, I pulled out my phone and checked my calendar. I had a note: "Call Foster Ray, lumber delivery from Lancaster, PA." That was the weekend he was supposedly in Amish country haggling over black walnut for our legacy. He had even sent me pictures of barns. He must have downloaded them from the internet. The lie was so lazy, so arrogant. "Okay," I managed, the single word carrying the weight of a dozen new entries in my ledger. Part 2. The family has a shared cloud storage account. I am the administrator. I suspect files have been deleted. I need to know what, when, and by whom. I logged into the account on his terminal and granted him temporary access. Theo's fingers flew across the keyboard. "This is easy. They keep a full audit log. Okay, I am filtering for delete events in the last 6 months. Here we go." A list populated the screen, dozens of file names, all deleted by the user account Foster W. The timestamps were clustered into a single 2-hour period on April 10th. It was the day after our parents' funeral. "What was he deleting?" I asked, my voice tight. Theo scrolled through the list. "Looks like financial records, PDFs labeled tax returns 2018, estate planning docs, investment portfolio mom, deed 1421 Maple Grove." He was systematically erasing our parents' entire financial history. April 10th, I checked the paperwork from Meridian Capital Bank. The application for the fraudulent second mortgage was dated April 11th. He hadn't just committed fraud, he had done the prep work. He had wiped the server of any documents that could have contradicted the lies he was about to tell the bank, the lies he was about to tell me. This wasn't a desperate act. This was premeditated. Can you export this entire log? I asked. Timestamp, IP address, everything. Already done, Theo stated, dragging the file onto my USB drive. It is all there. The IP address he used traces back to a public hotspot at a coffee shop near his place. Smart enough to not do it from home, dumb enough to not use a VPN. He leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. Okay, Andy, that was the professional part. Now, as your friend, what the hell is going on? An audit of your own family, deleted files. A picture of your brother on a yacht when he is supposed to be somewhere else. This feels heavy. I looked at my friend, at his honest, curious face. And for the first time, I told someone the whole story. I didn't hold back. I told him about the foreclosure, the forgery, Artisan Oak, Apex Global, Marigold, the locks on the garage. The words poured out, cold and precise, like I was reading an incident report. When I was done, the workshop was silent, save for the low hum of a server rack in the corner. Theo just stared at me. Wow, he murmured softly. Just wow. I mean, I always knew he was a bit of a slick talker, but this is next level. He looked at the data on his screen, then back at me. So what are you going to do? I am going to finish my audit, I asserted. He thinks this is a family drama. It is not. It is a series of quantifiable fraudulent transactions, and I am going to document every single one of them. Theo nodded slowly, a small smile playing on his lips. I get it. You are not going to get mad. You are going to build a spreadsheet. Exactly, I confirmed. I am in, he declared, leaning forward. Whatever you need, data recovery, network traces, digital forensics, pro bono. Consider Tech Revival your official research and development department. That guy needs to have his ledger balanced. I felt a surge of gratitude so strong it almost knocked me off my feet. I wasn't on an island anymore. I had an ally. My seed money, my mother's $3,000, was still almost untouched. My next step wasn't digital, it was analog. It was dirty. Armed with the knowledge that trash collection day in Whispering Pines Estates was Tuesday, I set my alarm for 5:30 anti-meridian the next morning. Driving my 10-year-old, perfectly maintained Honda Accord through the silent, sleeping streets of Foster's neighborhood felt like a clandestine operation. Every house was a palace, with perfectly manicured lawns and 3-car garages. It was a neighborhood built to project success, to keep the messy parts of life hidden behind imposing brick facades. But once a week, they had to put their garbage out on the curb like everyone else. And the curb was public property. I found his house, the black Maserati, sleeping in the driveway under the glow of a motion sensor security light. And there they were, at the edge of the lawn, 3 enormous, dark green trash bins. A jackpot. I parked down the street, my heart thumping a nervous rhythm. This was a new kind of risk assessment. What was the probability of a neighbor seeing me and calling the cops? What was the reputational damage? I killed the engine and waited. At 6:15 anti-meridian, I saw the slow, blinking yellow lights of the sanitation truck turning onto the street. I got out of my car, carrying a box of donuts from a 24-hour bakery. The truck ground to a halt a few houses down. Otto Jiang hopped out, a man moving with the practiced efficiency of someone who has done the same job for 20 years. He saw me approaching and gave a cautious nod. Morning, I greeted. You are Otto, right? Yeah, you are Anderson Taylor from Maple Grove. He had a good memory. What are you doing out in this neck of the woods so early? Family stuff, I said, which was technically true. I held out the box. Figured you guys could use some coffee and donuts. Otto's face broke into a warm smile. Well, I will be. My partner is going to love you. Thanks, son. He took the box. You mind if I ask you a weird question? Shoot, I offered. My brother, I explained, gesturing vaguely at Foster's house. We are having a little dispute. He accidentally threw out some important financial documents. Old tax stuff. I know it is a long shot, but I was hoping to see if I could find them before they get hauled off. Otto took a bite of a glazed donut and chewed thoughtfully. Happens all the time. Your brother's house, huh? That one? He pointed with the donut. Heavy on the shredded paper this week. Real heavy, filled up half a bin. Look, as long as it is on the curb, it ain't mine yet. Knock yourself out. Just be quick about it. Thank you, Otto. I really appreciate it, I expressed. He just shrugged, giving me a knowing look. Family stuff, I get it. He went back to work and I walked over to the bins. I opened the one marked recycling, and there it was. A huge clear plastic bag filled to the brim with the cross-cut confetti of my brother's secrets. I hoisted it out along with 2 other bags of regular trash and carried them to my car. They filled the trunk and the back seat. My sensible sedan, which usually smelled of nothing but clean upholstery, was now a rolling dumpster. I got back to Maple Grove Lane as the sun was coming up. My father's study was now my war room. I put down a plastic tarp, snapped on a pair of blue nitrile gloves, and emptied the bags. It was a disgusting archaeology of deceit. Empty bottles of wine that cost more than my weekly grocery bill. Takeout containers from restaurants I couldn't afford. Packaging for a new 55-inch television. And receipts, dozens of them. Gas for the Maserati, paid with a credit card I didn't recognize. A $2,000 bar tab at the Gilded Lounge. A hotel bill from the Ritz-Carlton in Miami, dated April 28th. I put it all aside and focused on the main prize, the bag of shredded paper. It was an overwhelming mountain of confetti, but I had a system. I had Theo's software recommendation and a high-speed scanner. I spent the next 10 hours in a tedious, mind-numbing cycle. Arrange a handful of strips on the scanner bed, scan, let the software analyze and attempt to match the pieces, repeat. It was the world's most depressing jigsaw puzzle. Most of it was junk mail, credit card offers, catalogs for things I had never buy. But then, late into the night, my eyes burning from staring at the screen, a document started to take shape in the reconstruction window. A logo slowly formed at the top of the page. It was for a small, private bank I had never heard of, Intercoastal Trust and Fiduciary. And below it, the words account statement for Apex Global Holdings. I felt a jolt of electricity like I had struck oil. This was it, the internal combustion engine of his entire fraud. I painstakingly pieced together 3 full pages. It was a full, unadulterated record of his spending. The first entry was a wire transfer in. From Meridian Capital Bank, the amount $250,000, the source of funds. The rest was a cascade of debits out. A wire transfer to Exotic Motors of Tysons. Amount $72,450, the Maserati. A check made out to the Gilded Lounge Membership Committee. Amount $15,000, the initiation fee. A series of charges from the Ritz-Carlton, Miami Beach. Total $8,700, his lumber sourcing trip. And then I saw the pattern. Interspersed with these huge, life-altering expenses were dozens of smaller ones. Charges for groceries at Whole Foods. Charges for Sage's yoga studio membership. Charges for their Netflix subscription. Charges for coffee. He wasn't just using the fraudulent company to fund a few big purchases. He was using it as his personal checking account. He was living off it. Every single dollar of his glamorous life, from the car he drove to the almond milk in his fridge, was being paid for directly by Apex Global Holdings. And that is when I saw it, the fatal flaw, the critical error in his risk assessment. I am an actuary at Commonwealth Surety Group. I spend a significant portion of my year analyzing liability for our corporate clients. I know tax law. Specifically, I know the bright, shining line between a legitimate business expense and personal income. Foster hadn't just crossed that line, he had nuked it from orbit. He had set up Apex Global Holdings as a pass-through S-corporation. I could tell from the banking documents. That meant the company itself didn't pay income tax. The profits or losses were passed through to the owner, him to be declared on his personal tax return. But he wasn't treating it like a business. He was treating it like a tax-free personal slush fund. Every dollar he spent on his lifestyle, every latte and yoga class, was undeclared personal income. He had taken $250,000, run it through a corporate entity to make it look legitimate, and then spent it on himself without paying a single cent in federal or state income tax. It was fraud, it was embezzlement, but more importantly, it was simple, beautiful, straightforward tax evasion. That was the key. My fight wasn't about a forged signature on a mortgage anymore. That was a messy, he said, she said family dispute. It was complicated, emotional. But tax evasion, that was a cold, hard number. It was a conversation between Foster and the Internal Revenue Service, a conversation I was going to quietly and anonymously facilitate. The sun was coming up again. I was exhausted, filthy, and surrounded by the literal garbage of my brother's life, but I had never felt more clear-headed. I opened the Ledger of Ruin. I created a new tab, IRS Whistleblower Submission Form 211. I began meticulously logging every piece of evidence: the bank statement, the receipts, the hotel bill that corresponded to the photo from the yacht. Each transaction was a separate line item, a separate nail in his financial coffin. Finally, I went back to the main summary page. I created a new liability entry. Item: Potential IRS liability, tax evasion, fiscal year, current year. Category: Federal crime. Evidence file, C-tab, IRS 211. Amount: I did a quick back-of-the-envelope calculation. $250,000 of undeclared income, plus state taxes, plus penalties for fraud. The number was staggering. I typed in my conservative estimate, $115,000. Notes: criminal liability, transcends civil familial dispute, risk transferred to external federal agency. Foster thought he was a risk taker. He was just an amateur. He had never calculated the tail risk. He saw the potential upside of $250,000, but he had never bothered to price the potential downside. The downside wasn't an angry brother. It was a federal audit, asset seizure, and a long, hard stay in a place with no gilded lounge, no Maseratis, and no bespoke furniture. He had no idea what was coming, but I did. I was modeling it right now, and the probability of his ruin was approaching 100%. Foster's greatest strength was also his most exploitable weakness. He believed his own press. He had spent a lifetime being told he was the charming one, the brilliant one, the one destined for greatness, and he had accepted it as gospel. This deep-seated belief allowed him to glide through life on a cloud of charisma and shortcuts, because a man destined for greatness doesn't need to waste time with things like reading the fine print or doing the actual work. He outsourced the tedious, the difficult, the foundational. He outsourced it to me. I thought about the OmniCorp presentation. He hadn't understood a single slide I had made for him, but he had presented them like he had personally birthed every data point from the depths of his own genius. He was a master of the executive summary, a virtuoso of the bullet point. The complex machinery beneath the surface was irrelevant to him as long as the dashboard looked good. This wasn't just laziness, it was a core operating philosophy, and it was going to be his ruin. My war room, formerly my father's study, was now wallpapered with evidence. On one wall I had a timeline, built on a long roll of butcher paper, tracking every key date from our parents' passing to the foreclosure notice. On another I had a relationship map, a spiderweb of strings and index cards connecting Foster, Sage, Apex Global Holdings, Meridian Capital Bank, and the Gilded Lounge. At the center of it all was my laptop, the Ledger of Ruin, its glowing, beating heart. The shredded documents were my Rosetta Stone. After piecing together the Apex bank statements, I started on a second, less promising pile of confetti from the same bag. It seemed to be mostly junk mail and old magazines. For 2 days I scanned and sorted, the software whirring away, stitching together scraps of glossy paper. I was about to give up, to classify this pile as non-essential, when a partial document materialized on my screen. It was an invoice, mostly complete. The logo at the top was for a company called SynoptiQ. I knew the name. It was the gold standard for high-end data visualization and predictive modeling software. A single-user license cost a fortune. My company, Commonwealth Surety, had a massive corporate account, but a consultant like Foster would need his own license for client work. The invoice was addressed to Foster Walsh at his office address for Sterling Stratagems. The line item was for one SynoptiQ Data Suite Enterprise Consultant license. The price made me whistle, $5,000 for 1 year, and then I saw the date. The renewal date was in 2 weeks, October 12th. The payment method on file was a credit card. The last 4 digits were 8842. I flipped back to the Apex Bank statement I had so painstakingly reconstructed. I scanned the list of credit cards associated with the account. There it was. A corporate Amex, ending in 8842. The same card he had used to pay for the Ritz-Carlton in Miami. The gears in my mind started to turn, clicking into place with a cold, satisfying precision. Foster, in his arrogance and haste, had used his fraudulent slush fund to pay for the single most critical tool of his legitimate trade. It was a classic commingling of funds, a sloppy piece of accounting that a first-year business student would know to avoid. He had created a single point of failure. He had linked his real job to his fake one. and the annual subscription renewal was the fuse. All I had to do was light it. My first call was to Ivy. I met her for coffee at a little cafe halfway between our offices. I kept it hypothetical. Ivy, quick question for you about corporate structures. I stirred my black Americano. Let's say there is an S-corp and the owner of that S-corp is using the corporate bank account to pay for his mortgage, his groceries, his vacations. What happens? Ivy took a delicate sip of her latte, leaving a little foam mustache on her upper lip. You mean besides massive tax fraud? Her lips curved into a grin. Legally, it is called piercing the corporate veil. A corporation is designed to be a legal shield, to separate the owner's personal assets from the company's liabilities. But if the owner treats the corporation like his personal piggy bank, a court can rule that the shield doesn't exist. It means creditors or the IRS can go after his personal assets, his house, his car, his savings, to satisfy the company's debts. So, if the company's bank got wind of this, they would have a reason to be concerned. Concerned, Ivy laughed. They would have a 5-alarm fire. Banks have know your customer laws and anti-money laundering regulations. If they knowingly allow a client to use a corporate account for illicit purposes, they can face huge fines, even lose their charter. If they got a credible tip that a client was commingling funds that blatantly, they would freeze that account so fast it would create a sonic boom. They wouldn't even hesitate. It is pure risk mitigation. Risk mitigation, she was speaking my language. Thanks, Ivy, I slid a 20 across the table. Coffee for the week is on me. Anytime, Andy, her expression turned serious. Just be careful what veils you go around piercing. My next stop was to see Theo. I found him in his workshop, disassembling a laptop with the focus of a bomb disposal expert. I have a hypothetical for you too, I leaned against the counter. I am starting to think your life has become one big hypothetical, he replied without looking up. If someone wanted to submit an anonymous tip to a bank's fraud department, what is the safest way to do it without leaving a digital footprint? He finally looked up, a pair of tweezers held in his hand. You want to drop a dime on your brother? It wasn't a question. I want to provide a financial institution with information relevant to their risk management protocols. The corporate jargon was a comfortable shield. Theo smirked. Right, okay, you don't do it from your home computer, you don't do it from your phone, you don't do it from the Starbucks on your block. You go to a public library in a town you don't live in. You use one of their public terminals. You create a new disposable email address, a Proton Mail account, something encrypted. You write your tip, you attach your evidence, you send it, then you log out and you never ever log into that account again. As far as the world is concerned, the message materialized out of the digital ether. And the evidence. Make sure it is clean, he advised, turning back to his work. Scrub the metadata from any files you send. If you are sending scans of documents, make sure there are no watermarks or anything that can trace back to your specific scanner. You want the information to be pure, untraceable data. The plan was now fully formed. It was simple, it was elegant, and it was completely legally fireproof. I wasn't hacking him, I wasn't even technically sabotaging him. I was a concerned citizen, anonymously reporting evidence of blatant, ongoing bank fraud. The consequences of that report, the fact that it would cause his mission-critical software license to fail at the worst possible moment, were just the predictable result of his own poor decisions. I was simply letting gravity do its work. The first step was to confirm the timeline. When was the worst possible moment? I needed to know what Foster was working on at Sterling Stratagems. A little light, open-source intelligence was in order. I logged into LinkedIn, a platform I despised for its relentless corporate-sanctioned cheerleading. I navigated to Foster's profile. He had updated it recently. His headline now read, Senior Management Consultant Driving Synergistic Growth and Disruptive Innovation at Sterling Stratagems. It was nauseating. I scrolled through his recent activity. It was the usual mix of him liking articles about blockchain and sharing inspirational quotes from people who had never had a real job. But then I saw it, a post from 3 days ago. It was a picture of him standing in a glass-walled conference room, pointing at a whiteboard covered in meaningless diagrams. The caption read, Thrilled to be in the final stages of our Q3 strategic review for our partners at Viridian Dynamics. It has been an incredible journey of deep dives and blue sky thinking. Can't wait to present our game-changing roadmap to their executive board on October 14th. Big things are coming. Hashtag consulting, hashtag strategy, hashtag innovation, hashtag Veridian Dynamics. October 14th, 2 days after his SynoptiQ software license was due to renew. The timing was so perfect it felt like a gift from the universe. That presentation to Veridian Dynamics, a major publicly traded company, would be his entire world. He would have spent months on it. The final output, the glossy charts and the predictive models that made him look like a genius, would all be locked inside the SynoptiQ software suite. If that license failed to renew, his project file would be an unreadable brick. He wouldn't be able to open it, edit it, or present it. He would be standing in front of the Veridian Dynamics executive board with absolutely nothing, a general without an army. The next evening, I drove 40 minutes west to a town called Leesburg, a place I had no connection to. I found the public library, a quiet, stately brick building. I walked past the children's section, the smell of old paper and book glue in the air, and sat down at an anonymous beige computer terminal tucked away in a corner. Following Theo's instructions, I created a new encrypted email address, ledger_balance@protonmail.com. I kept the message itself short and to the point. No emotion, no backstory, just the facts. Defraud tips@intercoastaltrust.com. From ledger_balance@protonmail.com. Subject: urgent, potential misuse of corporate account, Apex Global Holdings. To the Compliance Department of Intercoastal Trust and Fiduciary. This is an anonymous tip regarding your client, Apex Global Holdings LLC. I have reason to believe the sole officer of this S corporation, Mr. Foster Walsh, is using the associated corporate credit card, ending in 8842, for personal expenses, in direct violation of your terms of service and federal banking regulations. This commingling of personal and business funds represents a significant liability risk for your institution. As evidence, please see the attached redacted receipts showing expenditures for non-business related activities, including personal travel and entertainment. I urge you to investigate this matter to mitigate your own institutional risk. Sincerely, a concerned party. I attached 3 files, all scrubbed of metadata as Theo had instructed. The first was the hotel bill from the Ritz-Carlton in Miami. The second was the $2,000 bar tab from the Gilded Lounge. The third was a receipt for a monthly membership at Sage's Yoga Studio. Each one was a clear, unambiguous personal expense, paid for by the Apex corporate card. It was a small, targeted data packet designed for maximum impact. I wasn't trying to prove his entire case. I was just giving the bank enough rope to hang him with. I read the email one last time. It was perfect. It wasn't the email of a vengeful brother, it was the email of a risk analyst. I clicked send, the email disappeared into the ether. I logged out of the account, cleared the browser cache, and walked out of the library, leaving no trace I had ever been there. The drive home felt different. The weight hadn't lifted, but it had shifted. I had spent weeks reacting, gathering data, living in the past. Now, for the first time, I had acted. I had taken a piece of my meticulously gathered evidence and put it into play. I had set a trap, baited with my brother's own arrogance and laziness, and now it was ticking. I got home and opened the ledger of ruin. I went to my timeline. On the date October 12th, I wrote, SynoptiQ license renewal payment due. Next to it in red ink, I wrote, projected payment failure. On October 14th, I wrote, Foster Walsh Veridian Dynamics Q3 presentation. Next to that, I wrote, projected catastrophic system failure. I leaned back in my chair. For an actuary, there is no greater satisfaction than building a predictive model that performs exactly as expected. I had identified the variables. I had calculated the probabilities. I had initiated the precipitating event. All that was left to do was wait and watch the system collapse. The beautiful, orderly, inevitable math of it was the only comfort I had left, and in that moment it was enough. The week between sending an anonymous email that will detonate a bomb under your brother's life and the bomb actually going off is a unique form of torment. It is a quiet, agonizing limbo. I had run my calculations, set the variables, and initiated the event. Now all I could do was wait for the model to play out. For an actuary, this is hell. My entire profession is about eliminating uncertainty, and here I was, living in the epicenter of it. Would the bank's compliance department be competent? Would they act quickly? Was there some unknown variable, some countermeasure Foster had in place that I hadn't accounted for? My mind, deprived of a new problem to solve, started to chew on itself. I found myself packing the worn rug in my father's study, running the probabilities over and over. 92% chance the bank freezes the account, 95% chance the software payment fails, 98% chance Foster doesn't even notice the payment failure until he tries to open his presentation file on the morning of the 14th. The numbers were good. The model was sound. But there was still that tiny, nagging sliver of uncertainty, and it was getting louder every day. I needed to do something. More than that, I needed Foster to be doing something. A man under pressure makes mistakes. A man who thinks he is fighting a war on one front doesn't see the attack coming from the other. Right now, he was probably feeling comfortable, confident. He had secured the house, he had neutralized me through the courts, he was busy preparing for his big, career-making presentation for Veridian Dynamics. He was focused. I needed to break that focus. I needed to send up a few flares, a bit of strategic noise and smoke to draw his attention. The attacks had to be small, annoying, and most importantly, they had to look like they came from me. They had to feel like the desperate, petty acts of a bitter and defeated brother, not the cold, calculated moves of an auditor balancing a ledger. My first target was his pride. I went back to the meager digital assets of Artisan Oak Creations. There wasn't much. The Coming Soon website was still a single static page, but front and center was the logo. A stylized oak tree, its roots forming the letters A and O. As the blueprint noted, I had to admit it was good. It looked expensive, authentic. I designed it myself, Foster had told me, puffing out his chest. Just sketched it out on a napkin one night. The vision just came to me. Foster couldn't sketch a convincing stick figure. That claim had always been a statistical anomaly in my mind. Now I had the tools to investigate. I took a high-resolution screenshot of the logo and sent it to Theo. "Hey Theo," I wrote in the email. "Quick job for you. Can you run a deep source analysis on this image file? I am looking for its digital provenance." The reply came back in less than an hour. "Provenance found," Theo wrote. "Your brother's vision appears to have come to him via crowdsourced logo design contest on a site called Logolux.net, which seems to be based out of Belgrade. The original artist is a freelancer named Katarina Ivanovic. She submitted this design for a contest for a Slovenian honey company 2 years ago. It was a runner-up. Foster or someone just changed the color from gold to forest green and photoshopped the letters." Theo had attached a link to the original contest page. There it was. The same elegant tree, the same intricate root system. And at the bottom, the usage rights, spelled out in plain English. Winner receives full commercial rights. All other submitted designs remain the intellectual property of the artist and may be licensed for non-commercial use only upon request. Foster hadn't just gotten inspired by the design. He hadn't licensed it for the wrong use. He had just stolen it. He had right-clicked and saved, confident that no one would ever connect his phantom Arlington furniture company with a 2-year-old design contest in the Balkans. It was the OmniCorp presentation all over again, just on a smaller, more artistic scale. Find someone else's good work and put your name on it. This was perfect. It was a clean, verifiable case of intellectual property theft. And it was just the kind of thing an angry brother locked out of a company he co-founded would raise a stink about. Another evening, another trip to a library in another town. This time I went north to a branch in a sleepy suburb I had never visited before. I logged into my anonymous ProtonMail account, the one I had used to tip off the bank, but I created a new identity. I wasn't an anonymous risk analyst anymore. I was an anonymous supporter of the arts. I found Katarina Ivanovic's professional portfolio online. Her work was beautiful and she had a contact form. I kept the message simple, factual, and helpful. "Dear Ms. Ivanovic, I am an admirer of your design work, specifically the logo you submitted to the Slovenian honey contest on Logolux.net 2 years ago, link included. I am writing to inform you that a slightly altered version of your copyrighted design is being used for commercial purposes, without apparent credit or license, by a United States-based LLC named Artisan Oak Creations. They are featuring it prominently on their business website, link included. As an artist myself, I believe creators should be compensated for their work. You may wish to have your legal counsel send a formal cease and desist letter or a DMCA takedown notice to the company's registered agent. In the state of Virginia, that information is public record. Sincerely, a fellow designer." I hit send. It was a beautiful little piece of risk transfer. I wasn't threatening anyone. I wasn't making demands. I was just a concerned citizen providing a talented and likely underpaid Serbian graphic designer with all the information she needed to enforce her own copyright. The legal headache, the frantic calls to lawyers, the humbling letter from halfway across the world demanding he stop using his vision, that would all be Foster's problem. And when he got that letter, his first thought wouldn't be about a bank in Wilmington. It would be about me. One flare was in the air, time to launch the second. This one was even more bureaucratic, more mundane, more perfect. Back in my war room, I was sifting through the box of estate documents I had managed to secure before Foster had me legally neutered. Most of it was old insurance policies and car titles. But at the bottom, I found the original plat of survey for 1421 Maple Grove Lane from when my parents bought the house in 1985. The zoning designation was right there, printed in the corner in faded dot matrix type, R1, strictly residential. Now I knew plenty of people ran home-based businesses, but there were rules, regulations. It was a statistical certainty that Foster had never read a single page of the Arlington County Municipal Code. I, on the other hand, found it to be fascinating reading. I spent a Saturday morning on the county's website, cross-referencing the zoning laws with the requirements for a business occupancy permit. The language was dense but clear. Any LLC registered to a residential address, even if it was just for mail and not for customer traffic, was required to obtain a BOP. The application process was simple, but it created a public record. It was a $10 filing fee and a form I was certain Foster had never filed. Ivy had shown me how to use the county's public records portal. I logged in and searched for any permits issued to Artisan Oak Creations or Apex Global Holdings at my parents' address. The search came back with a stark, beautiful message: 0 results found. This was a violation, a minor one to be sure, the kind of thing that usually results in a warning and a small fine, but it was a violation nonetheless. And the complaint process was, by law, anonymous. It was another perfect, petty nuisance. A few days later, I was in a library again, this time south of the city. I went to the county's Report of Violation web portal. The form was designed for reporting things like overgrown lawns or abandoned cars, but it had a field for other. To the Department of Community Planning, Housing and Development, I wrote, I wish to anonymously report a potential zoning violation at the property located at 1421 Maple Grove Lane, Arlington. The property is zoned R1, single-family residential. A registered limited liability company, Artisan Oak Creations, State Corporation Commission ID number followed by the number I had found, lists this address as its principal place of business. A search of county records indicates that no business occupancy permit has been issued for this address. As a concerned resident of Arlington who follows the proper legal procedures for my own home-based business, I request that the county investigate this noncompliance. It was a masterpiece of petty, bureaucratic grievance. I sounded like the cranky old neighbor who measures the height of everyone's grass. It was so perfectly, believably not me, but it was exactly the kind of move Foster would expect from the brother he thought was flailing. I clicked submit. The second flare was up. Now he would be getting an official-looking letter from the county, probably with some scary-sounding ordinance numbers cited in bold type. It would be another distraction. Another hour spent on the phone with a county clerk instead of double-checking his presentation slides. Another piece of evidence for him that his bitter brother was trying to nickel-and-dime him to death. The waiting game was easier now. I had other models in play, smaller predictions to track. I fell into a routine. My day job at Commonwealth Surety, my nights in the war room, and my early morning trash runs. I saw Otto Jiang every Tuesday, always with donuts. We had an unspoken understanding. I never asked and he never told, but sometimes he would offer a small, unsolicited data point. Fancy envelopes in the recycling this week, Otto said one morning, gesturing toward Foster's bin. The kind with the clear windows looked like bills. Bills or bank notices, the first sign that the tip to Intercoastal Trust was percolating through their system. A few days later, Otto's report was different. Weird one today, a bunch of those thin, plasticky envelopes, the kind you get from overseas. Katerina Ivanovic's cease and desist letter had arrived from Serbia. The final confirmation came, as it so often did, from Sage's Instagram. It was a Friday night. I was in the study, reviewing the reconstructed Apex Bank statements, highlighting every personal expense in yellow. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from one of the anonymous accounts I had set up to monitor their social media. Sage had posted a new story. It was a picture of a wine glass held up in a toast. In the background, Foster was on the phone, packing his back to the camera. He looked agitated. The caption was pure passive-aggressive gold. When the universe tests you with petty haters and bureaucratic nonsense, you just have to sip your vintage Bordeaux and remember who you are. So proud of my man for staying focused on the big picture in the face of so much jealousy. The little people can't stop a king. Hashtag unbothered, hashtag king, hashtag haters gonna hate. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever read. It was confirmation of everything. The bureaucratic nonsense was the zoning violation. The petty haters was the copyright claim from a designer halfway across the world. He was stressed, he was distracted, and he was blaming it all on little people, on me. Sage's post was a public declaration that my smokescreen was working perfectly. They were looking in exactly the wrong direction. I took a screenshot of the post and saved it to my evidence folder. I created a new entry in the ledger of ruin, under the notes column for my distraction plays. Confirmation of receipt and psychological impact. Subject is agitated, distracted, and misattributing source of conflict. Main operational objective remains undetected. I looked at the calendar on my wall. It was October 10th. The SynoptiQ software license renewal was in 2 days. The presentation to Veridian Dynamics was in 4 days. The flares had done their job. The enemy was disoriented, his attention diverted. He was fighting ghosts I had created, while the real threat, the one that would vaporize his career, was already on its final approach. He thought he was a king fighting off a peasant. He had no idea he was just an overconfident amateur who was about to have his supply lines cut by a patient, meticulous, and extremely well-prepared actuary. The model was holding. The outcome was becoming a certainty. All I had to do now was wait for the beautiful, inevitable crash. The silence of a house that is supposed to be your home but isn't has a specific frequency. It is a low hum of absence. It is the sound of every footstep that is no longer there. For weeks I had filled that silence with the click of my keyboard, the rustle of stolen documents, the quiet whir of a scanner. It was the soundtrack of my audit. But now it was October 12th and all the sounds had stopped. There was nothing left to do but listen. My model predicted that today, a server somewhere in California belonging to SynoptiQ Data Suite would attempt to charge a corporate American Express card, ending in 8842 for the sum of $5,000. My other model, based on the anonymous tip to Intercoastal Trust and Fiduciary, predicted that this charge would be declined. The bank, spooked by the words money laundering and federal investigation, would have frozen the Apex Global Holdings account like a woolly mammoth in a glacier. It was a beautiful, logical cause and effect sequence, but I had no way to confirm it. I was flying blind and it was shredding my nerves. Anxiety is an unacceptable variable. It is an emotion that clouds judgment and leads to poor risk assessment. I needed to convert that anxiety into action. I couldn't attack the main objective directly, that would be tipping my hand. But I could continue my campaign of strategic harassment. I could turn up the heat on the secondary fronts, not to win those battles, but to ensure Foster was too busy fighting them to notice the real war he was about to lose. I looked at the relationship map on my wall, the web of index cards and string. 2 people were connected directly to Foster with thick, solid lines, Marigold, Bailey, and Sage Flint. They were his enablers, his Praetorian guard of willful ignorance. They weren't just part of his defense, they were the foundation of his narrative. He was the brilliant son, the successful provider. As long as they believed that, the world believed it. I had tried a direct assault on Marigold's belief system, and it had failed spectacularly. I had presented her with facts, and she had countered with feelings, a form of asymmetrical warfare I was unequipped to handle. So I wouldn't try to change her mind. I would simply give it a new set of facts to process, facts designed to look like they came from the brother she already pitied. I picked up the phone and dialed her number. I took 3 slow, deep breaths, deliberately pushing my voice down, making it sound tired, defeated. She answered on the second ring. "Anderson, is everything all right, honey?" "Hey, Marigold," I offered, my voice a quiet rasp. I wanted to apologize for the other day. You were right. I was stressed out and I said some things I shouldn't have." The relief in her voice was immediate and palpable. "Oh, honey, don't you worry about that for a second. Of course you are stressed. You have been through so much. I am just glad you called." The hook was set, now for the bait. "It is just," I let my voice trail off, injecting a theatrical note of hesitation. I am so worried about Foster. What about him? Marigold's tone shifted instantly to one of maternal concern. This whole furniture business, Artisan Oak Creations, I think I pushed him into it too hard after Mom and Dad passed, I confessed, laying the foundation of my own incompetence. He had this grand vision, you know how he is, all passion and big ideas, and I got so bogged down in the details, the numbers, I think I held him back. Now I am afraid the whole thing is falling apart and it is my fault. Now you stop that right now, she clucked. Foster is a brilliant boy, he knows business. I know he is, I affirmed, agreeing with her core belief to build trust. But he is so trusting, Marigold. He sees the best in everyone. A few months ago, he found this amazing supplier for the lumber, a man named Frank Henderson from a little family-run company called Appalachian Hardwoods down in West Virginia. Foster was so excited. He said this man was the real deal, an old-school artisan. Foster believed in him so much, he paid him a $20,000 deposit up front to secure our first big shipment of black walnut. Every detail was a lie. Frank Henderson, Appalachian Hardwoods, the $20,000 deposit. It was a complete fiction, but it was a plausible one. It was exactly the kind of story Foster himself would tell. Well, that sounds like a good business decision, she replied a little uncertainly. It did, I confided, my voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. But Marigold, this Frank Henderson isn't returning his calls anymore. The number for his company is disconnected. I tried to look them up online and I can't find anything. I am scared, Marigold. I think this man took our money and ran. I tried to talk to Foster about it, but he just gets angry and defensive. He keeps saying he has it under control, but I think he is too proud to admit he got taken advantage of. $20,000, that was most of our startup capital. I let the silence hang there, heavy and suffocating. I had given her a problem she could solve, a role she could play. She wasn't being asked to judge between her two boys. She was being asked to help the brilliant, trusting one who had been tricked by a bad man. Oh, that poor boy, she finally whispered, her voice full of sympathy. He always did wear his heart on his sleeve. I know you two are close, I prompted, landing the final piece. Maybe you could talk to him, not in an accusing way, just ask him about it, see if he is okay. He won't listen to me. He thinks I am just the boring numbers guy who worries too much, but he will listen to you. Of course I will, honey, she promised, her voice firm with purpose. I will call him this afternoon, don't you worry, we will get to the bottom of this Frank Henderson fellow. Thank you, Marigold, I managed, my voice thick with fake gratitude. You are the only one who can get through to him. I hung up the phone and felt a cold, bitter taste in my mouth. I had taken this woman's love for my family and twisted it into a weapon. I had loaded a gun with lies and put it in her hand, knowing she would fire it without a second thought. It was a monstrous thing to do. I logged it in my ledger under the notes column. Manipulation of familial asset M. Bailey successful. Projected outcome. Increased psychological stress on target and forced fabrication of new alibi. Documenting it, quantifying it, was the only way I could stomach it. My next target was Sage. Marigold was the guardian of Foster's family image. Sage was the curator of his public one. She was the walking, talking, Instagramming embodiment of his success. Attacking her required a different kind of weapon, not pity, but ambition. I drove to the library in a town over, sat at my now familiar anonymous computer terminal, and began my research. Sage's professional website was exactly what I expected. A minimalist design, lots of dramatic black and white photos of her mid-leap, and long, jargon-filled artist statements about interrogating the dialectic between kinetic expression and corporeal space. It was pretentious, but it was professional, and it had a contact me form for professional inquiries. I created a new persona, Alastair Finch, Senior Fellow, North Atlantic Choreography Fellowship. I gave him a backstory, a stuffy, academic tone, and a prestigious but completely fictional organization. Then I composed my email. Dear Ms. Flint, my name is Alastair Finch, and I am the Senior Fellow for Patronage and Development at the North Atlantic Choreography Fellowship. The Board of Directors and I have been following your emerging career with great interest. Your recent work, particularly the haunting and evocative piece exploring the commodification of vulnerability, has marked you as one of the most compelling new voices in contemporary dance. Your unique synthesis of classical technique and postmodern deconstruction is precisely the kind of boundary-pushing artistry our fellowship seeks to support. To that end, I am delighted to inform you that you are on the final shortlist of 3 candidates for our 2023 Copenhagen Showcase Fellowship. This is a significant honor, carrying with it a €30,000 grant, a 3-month residency at the Royal Danish Ballet, and a fully produced evening of your work at the Skuespilhuset Theatre in Copenhagen. As we move to our final selection, our underwriters require a final round of due diligence. This is a standard part of our process, designed to ensure the financial stability and reputational integrity of our fellows and their primary patrons. It is, I am afraid, a bit of tedious but necessary paperwork. We require a simple letter from the primary business enterprise of your partner, Mr. Foster Walsh, confirming his role and the general good standing of the company. Based on your public social media, we understand this to be Artisan Oak Creations. Our own preliminary research has been unable to locate standard corporate bona fides for this entity. For example, a functioning website, public financial statements, a Dun & Bradstreet number, which has raised a minor procedural flag with our underwriters. A simple letter from Mr. Walsh on company letterhead, briefly outlining the nature of the business and confirming his executive role, would be more than sufficient to clear this flag. We would require this letter by the end of the business day on October 14th to present to our board for the final vote. We very much hope to be able to proceed with your candidacy. You are a singular talent, Ms. Flint. Sincerely, Alastair Finch, Senior Fellow, North Atlantic Choreography Fellowship. It was a work of art. It dripped with praise. It offered her everything she had ever wanted: money, prestige, international recognition. It made her feel seen, celebrated. And then, tucked away in the middle of all that flattery, was the poison pill. A simple, professional, impossible request. Artisan Oak Creations had no letterhead. It had no good standing. It had no nature of business. It had a zeroed-out bank account and a stolen logo. Foster could not produce this letter. He couldn't tell her why he couldn't produce this letter without admitting his entire life was a fraud. He would have to lie to her. He would have to invent a reason why this simple piece of paper was impossible to get. And in so doing, he would become the sole obstacle standing between Sage and her dream. I hit send. The email shot off into the digital void, a cruise missile of ego and ambition aimed directly at the fault line in their relationship. I could already picture the scene. Sage bursting with excitement. Foster, his face turning pale as he reads the email, the gears of his mind grinding, trying to invent a plausible lie on the spot. The company is in a quiet period before a major acquisition, maybe. Or we are in the middle of a rebranding. All our letterhead is being redesigned. Whatever he came up with, it would be weak, it would be suspicious, and it would plant the first tiny, toxic seed of doubt in Sage's mind. I walked out of the library and into the cool October evening. The waiting didn't feel so agonizing anymore. I had my hands on the levers of Foster's world. I was pulling them, one by one, watching the pressure gauges rise. I got home just after 9 post-meridian. As I walked into the study, an email notification popped up on my laptop screen. It wasn't from Alastair Finch or Marigold Bailey. It was an automated message, sent to an old email address I hadn't used in years, a joint account I had shared with Foster in college that we used for things like utility bills and magazine subscriptions. I had forgotten it even existed. But apparently, Foster had used it years ago to sign up for a student trial of the SynoptiQ software suite, and they had never taken it off their mailing list. The subject line was stark and simple: payment declined for your SynoptiQ subscription. My heart hammered in my chest. I opened the email. Dear user, we are writing to inform you that we were unable to process the annual renewal payment for your SynoptiQ Data Suite license, key number 77B4Q2K9P. The charge of $5,000 to your American Express card ending in 8842 was declined by the issuing bank. Your license is now expired. To continue accessing your project files and the SynoptiQ software, please update your payment information immediately. Thank you. The SynoptiQ billing team. I read it twice, then a third time. The model had performed perfectly. The bank had frozen the account. The payment had failed. The license was expired. The trap which I had laid with a quiet, anonymous email a week ago had just snapped shut. Foster's most important file, the key to the biggest presentation of his career, was now a useless string of encrypted data on his hard drive. And with the distractions I had just launched, he was almost certainly too busy dealing with phantom lumber suppliers and fictitious arts fellowships to even notice. I leaned back in my father's chair, the old leather sighing. I looked at the calendar. It was still October 12th. His presentation was in 36 hours. He was walking into an ambush he couldn't see, armed with a gun that had no bullets. He thought he was a king. He had no idea his kingdom was already gone. I had manipulated his allies, his enablers, the useful idiots who propped up his world, and turned them into instruments of his own destruction. They were asking him the questions he couldn't answer, creating the pressure he couldn't escape. The books were not yet balanced, but the final, brutal reconciliation was now just a matter of time. The day before a predicted catastrophe is always the calmest. At Commonwealth Surety Group, we call it the pre-cat lull. It is the quiet hours before the hurricane makes landfall, the eerie silence before the earthquake hits. All the models have been run, all the warnings have been issued. The event is now in motion, a physical inevitability moving across the earth. There is nothing left to do but wait for the damage reports to start coming in. It was October 13th. In less than 24 hours, Foster would walk into the boardroom at Veridian Dynamics, open his laptop, and discover that his career was a read-only file he no longer had permission to access. My main trap was set. My predictive model was running, but the lull was unbearable. An actuary abhors a vacuum of action. I needed more data. I needed to set the next trap. My target was the Gilded Lounge. According to my research, it was the social and professional nexus for Foster's entire fraudulent life. It was where he networked, where he showcased Sage, where he performed the role of the up-and-coming business prodigy. Taking that away from him wasn't just about social humiliation. It was about destroying his stage. It was about taking away the theater where he performed the character of Foster Walsh. The blueprint for this operation was similar to my others. A clean, anonymous, professional data packet delivered to the right person. I spent the morning in my war room compiling the evidence. The Gilded Lounge's membership application, which I had found a blank copy of online, had a notoriously strict integrity and disclosure clause. Applicants were required to list their primary business affiliations and attest to their good standing. Foster, I knew, would have listed Artisan Oak Creations. It was the centerpiece of his sentimental legacy narrative. My package was a manila envelope, crisp and businesslike. Inside was a 3-page report. Page 1 was a printout of the Artisan Oak Creations website, with the stolen Serbian logo circled in red. Page 2 was a copy of the official DMCA takedown notice I had found filed online by Katerina Ivanovic's legal team just yesterday. Page 3 was a redacted copy of the Apex Global Holdings bank statement, with the $15,000 check to the Gilded Lounge membership committee highlighted in fluorescent yellow. The message was simple, devastating, and required no emotional interpretation. One of your members paid his initiation fee using a fraudulent corporate entity and founded his primary business on intellectual property theft. He is a liar and a liability. The head of the membership committee, according to the club's painfully discreet website, was a man named Harrison Croft. Sending the package via courier felt too impersonal, too easily intercepted or dismissed. I needed to ensure it landed on the right desk. I decided to deliver it myself, posing as a messenger. It was a risk, a stupid one probably, but the lull was making me reckless. I needed to see the belly of the beast. The Gilded Lounge was a fortress of old money tucked away on a quiet street downtown. It had no sign, just a pair of imposing oak doors and a small, polished brass plaque that read simply, "Members Only." It was the kind of place that didn't need to advertise because if you had to ask where it was, you couldn't get in. I was dressed in the blandest outfit I owned: gray slacks, a navy blue polo shirt, a nondescript windbreaker. I was aiming for invisible, the kind of service worker the members of a place like this are trained to look straight through. I had the envelope tucked inside my jacket. My plan was to walk in, hand it to the concierge, say it was for Mr. Croft, and walk out. 30 seconds in and out. A simple, low-risk transaction. I took a deep breath, the pre-cat lull pressing in on me, and pushed open one of the heavy oak doors. The inside was even more intimidating than the outside. The air was thick with the smell of floor wax, leather, and money so old it had probably been passed down from the Mayflower. A cavernous lobby, paneled in dark, gleaming mahogany, rose 2 stories to a coffered ceiling. A fire crackled in a fireplace big enough to roast a wildebeest. The only sounds were the rustle of a newspaper and the quiet clink of ice in a glass. To my right was a massive, curved reception desk, manned by a concierge who looked like he had been born in a tuxedo. This was my target. I started to walk towards him, my hand reaching inside my jacket for the envelope. I was 10 feet away, my cover story ready on my lips. Delivery for Harrison Croft, simple, effective. And then the other oak door opened. My blood turned to ice water. It was Foster, and right behind him, Sage. They didn't see me. They were in their own world, a swirling vortex of anger and stress. Foster's face was pale, his $1 million smile nowhere in sight. He was wearing an impeccably tailored suit, but he looked like he had slept in it. Sage was a vision of cold fury, her face a mask of disappointment. I don't understand why you can't just write the letter, Foster. Sage's voice was a low, vicious hiss. It is not simple, Sage, okay? Foster ran a hand through his usually perfect hair, his voice sharp. There are corporate protocols. We are in a quiet period. I can't just issue statements about the company's standing. It could jeopardize the whole acquisition. What acquisition? Sage snapped, her eyes narrowing. You have never mentioned an acquisition. You told me last week you were still trying to source lumber from some Amish guy named Frank. My heart was a hummingbird trapped in my ribcage. I was frozen, exposed in the middle of the lobby. To my left was a long hallway leading deeper into the club. To my right was the concierge, who was now looking up from his desk, his eyes flicking from the arguing couple to me. Fleeing would be an admission of guilt. Staying was an invitation to discovery. My mind, the actuary, took over. I saw a small alcove next to the fireplace, partially obscured by a monstrous potted fern. It was a suboptimal position, offering only partial concealment. But the probability of being seen there was lower than my current position. I took 2 quick, silent steps back and slid into the shadows of the alcove, the waxy leaves of the fern brushing against my cheek. The concierge, his professional decorum kicking in, stepped out from behind his desk. Mr. Walsh, Miss Flint, welcome. Your table is ready in the atrium. Thanks, Charles. Foster waved a dismissive hand, not even looking at him. He was still focused on Sage. Look, can we not do this here? I want to see the letter, Foster. Sage's voice was dangerously calm, her gaze fixed on him. The fellowship board meets tomorrow. This is a €30,000 grant. It is a residency in Copenhagen. This is my entire future, and you are telling me you can't write one simple letter because of protocols. From my hiding spot, I had a perfect view of Foster's face. And for the first time, I saw real, genuine fear in his eyes. He wasn't charming his way out of this. He wasn't in control. He was cornered. My fake fellowship, my tribute to Sage's ego, was working better than I could have ever dreamed. It had bypassed his charisma and gone straight for the person he couldn't afford to lose. It is more complicated than that, he stammered. And on top of that, I had Marigold on the phone for an hour this morning, crying about some $20,000 deposit I supposedly gave to some hillbilly lumberjack who doesn't exist. I don't know where she is getting this stuff. It is like everyone is trying to sabotage me this week. He was flailing, he was drowning in my lies, and he didn't even know he was wet. He thought they were separate, unrelated fires, a string of bad luck. He couldn't see the architecture of it all, the meticulous design of his own destruction. Maybe if you were more transparent about the business, people wouldn't have to guess. Sage's words, colder and sharper than any of mine, landed like a blow. Foster let out a frustrated groan. I am transparent. Look, I have got the Veridian presentation tomorrow. It is the biggest deal of my career. My head is not in the right place to deal with this other nonsense. Can we please just have a quiet lunch and strategize? He started to walk towards the hallway, but his hand slipped and his phone, a sleek black rectangle, clattered to the polished marble floor. It skidded across the tiles and came to rest less than 3 feet from my shoe. My breathing stopped. The world narrowed to that phone, a black mirror reflecting the ornate ceiling. Foster cursed under his breath and took a step towards it. He was going to bend down. He was going to see me. My muscles tensed. The fight-or-flight instinct screamed at me, but I was frozen, a statue of pure adrenaline. This was it. A catastrophic failure. My entire carefully constructed plan was about to be undone by a clumsy mistake and a potted fern that wasn't quite big enough. Foster took another step. He crouched down, his eyes on the phone. His hand reached out. His gaze started to lift from the floor. I could see the cuff of his expensive shirt, the glint of his stupidly expensive watch. He was going to look right into my face. Foster, for God's sake, just leave it. Sage's voice cut through the silence like a scalpel. Charles can get it, let us go. Foster hesitated. His eyes were still on the phone. His head was turned just enough that he couldn't see me yet, but 1 more inch. Mr. Walsh? The concierge glided past Foster, his voice as smooth as silk. He bent down with an effortless grace and picked up the phone. "Allow me." He wiped it with a cloth from his pocket and held it out on a silver tray he seemed to have conjured from thin air. Foster stood up, looking flustered. He snatched the phone off the tray. "Right, thanks, Charles." He shot a dark look at Sage and stalked off down the hallway without another word. Sage watched him go, her arms crossed, her expression a mixture of anger and a dawning, terrible suspicion. She turned and followed him, her heels clicking on the marble with a sharp, final sound. They were gone. I stayed in the alcove, my back pressed against the wall for what felt like a decade. My heart was a runaway train. I could feel the sweat trickling down my spine. I had never in my entire life been that close to a total system failure. The risk I had taken was insane, emotional, completely out of character, and I had almost paid the ultimate price for it. Slowly, my training kicked back in. The actuary reasserted control. I took a slow, steadying breath, then another. I reran the model. The primary variable, my brother, was behaving as predicted, only more erratically. The secondary variables, Sage and Marigold, were applying pressure as designed. The operational objective, delivery of the package, was still incomplete. The risk of remaining in my current location was now higher than the risk of completing the mission. I stepped out of the alcove, my legs feeling unsteady. I walked to the desk. Charles, the concierge, was back in his place, his expression a perfect, unreadable mask of professional discretion. He had seen me. He had to have seen me hiding. He had seen the whole drama, but his face gave nothing away. He was a vault. "Can I help you, sir?" he asked, his voice a polite murmur. I pulled the envelope from my jacket. My hand was shaking slightly and I steadied it on the polished wood of the desk. "Yes," my voice came out surprisingly level. "A delivery for Mr. Harrison Croft. It is urgent." He took the envelope, his eyes briefly flicking over the name. "Of course, sir. I will see that he receives it immediately." "Thank you," I nodded. I turned and walked out of the gilded lounge, back into the bright, clear light of day. I didn't look back. I didn't run. I just walked, my pace steady, my mind a cold, clear engine once more. The near miss had been terrifying, but it had also been clarifying. It had given me invaluable, real-time data. Foster was falling apart. His lies were catching up to him, his carefully constructed world was cracking at the seams. He was distracted, besieged, and completely unprepared for the main event. I got in my car and looked at the clock on the dashboard. It was 1:15 post-meridian. In less than 20 hours, the Veridian Dynamics presentation would begin. The pre-cat lull was over. The storm was about to hit, and I had a front row seat. October 14th dawned gray and damp, the kind of Arlington morning that feels like the sky can't be bothered to make a decision. I was at my desk at Commonwealth Surety Group by 7 ante-meridian, nursing a cup of coffee that tasted like burnt ambition. My own work, a risk assessment model for a new line of commercial shipping insurance, was spread across my 3 monitors. It was complex, engaging work, and I couldn't have cared less about it. My real model, the one that had consumed my life for the past few weeks, was running in real time, and I was thousands of miles away from the event horizon. The presentation at Veridian Dynamics was scheduled for 9 ante-meridian. I pictured Foster striding into their gleaming corporate headquarters in Tyson's Corner. He would be radiating confidence, a performance he had been perfecting his whole life. He would shake hands, make a joke, charm the receptionist. He would walk into that boardroom, the king returning to his court. He would have no idea his crown was made of paper and his throne was rigged with explosives. My own desk phone felt like a bomb. Every time it rang, my stomach twisted into a knot. It was a junior analyst asking about a data table. It was my boss wanting a quick update on the shipping model. It was a robocall trying to sell me an extended car warranty. With each false alarm, the tension ratcheted up another notch. I was living in the tail end of a probability curve, the agonizing 99th percentile where the event is almost a certainty, but not quite. At 8:42 ante-meridian, my personal cell phone, sitting face down on my desk, began to vibrate. The caller ID was Foster. The pre-cat lull was officially over. The storm was making landfall. I let it ring 3 times, a small, petty assertion of control. Then I picked it up, took a slow breath, and activated the persona I had been rehearsing, the put-upon, long-suffering, but ultimately dependable older brother. "What do you want, Foster?" My voice came out flat and tired. "Andy, oh, thank God you picked up." His voice was a high-pitched, strangled thing stripped of all its usual smooth bravado. I could hear the tinny, echoing acoustics of a men's restroom. He was hiding. Andy, I am in a world of trouble, a world of it. Let me guess, I said, leaning back in my chair, staring at the gray sky outside my window. You have a big presentation in 18 minutes and you forgot to do your homework. It is not that, it is the software. The SynoptiQ program, it is not working. It is saying my license is expired. It won't let me open the file, Andy. It won't let me open my presentation. The panic was rolling off him in waves. He sounded like a teenager who had just crashed his dad's car. He sounded exactly like he had 3 years ago on the night of the Omnicorp disaster. I stayed silent. I let him stew in it. Did you hear me? He pleaded. The file is locked, my entire project, months of work. I am standing in front of the Veridian board in 15 minutes. Marcus Blackwood is in there right now drinking coffee, expecting a miracle. I am going to be humiliated. I am going to be fired. So update your payment information. My voice was devoid of sympathy. It is a simple fix. I can't, he wailed, his voice cracking. The card they have on file, the company card, there is a problem with the bank, a security freeze or something. I have been on the phone with them for 1 hour and it is a mess. It won't be fixed today. I have nothing, Andy. I am standing here with a laptop full of nothing. A security freeze. My anonymous email was a thing of beauty. A quiet, professional, devastatingly effective little masterpiece. That sounds like a personal problem, Foster. Please, he whispered, the sound so desperate and pathetic it was almost satisfying. You have to help me. I know you have models. You live and breathe this stuff. Just send me something, anything. A logistics model, a supply chain analysis, anything that looks smart. I can change the logos. I can talk my way through it. You know I can, but I need slides. I need charts. Please, Andy, I am begging you. This is my career. This was it, the fatal mistake. The moment he proved he had learned absolutely nothing. After all the lies, the theft, the cruelty, when faced with a crisis of his own making, his only instinct was to call the brother he had destroyed and ask me to clean up the mess. He didn't see me as an adversary. He still saw me as a utility, his human calculator. I had been waiting for this call. I had modeled this conversation. I had prepared for it. On a secure, encrypted drive in my cloud storage, a file was waiting. It was named Generic Logistics Model Version 7.sync. It was my Trojan horse. I let out a long, theatrical sigh. Foster, I am so tired of this. I am tired of being your safety net. I know, and I am sorry, he said, the lie coming easily even in his panic. I will make it up to you, I swear. We will fix everything with the house. Just this one last time, please. Fine, I snapped. Fine, I have an old model I built for a shipping company a few years ago. It is complicated, probably too complicated for you to understand, but it looks impressive. I will wipe the client data and send it to your personal email. But Foster, listen to me. We are done. This is the last time I bail you out. After this, you are on your own. Thank you, he gasped, a wave of pure relief washing through his voice. Thank you, Andy. You are a lifesaver. You have no idea. Oh, I think I do. I hung up. I swiveled back to my monitors. The shipping insurance model could wait. This was more important. I opened my secure cloud drive and located the file. Generic Logistics Model Version 7.sync. On the surface, it was a work of art, a perfect replica of the kind of work I did for Omnicorp. It was a comprehensive analysis of a hypothetical company's supply chain, full of complex regressions, Monte Carlo simulations, and beautiful, intuitive data visualizations. It had dozens of slides, all professionally designed, all telling a compelling story of hidden inefficiencies and massive potential savings. It was the kind of presentation that gets consultants promoted. But deep within the architecture of the model, on a hidden data tab that a cursory user would never see, I had planted a time bomb. A single, critical, and deliciously subtle error. The model projected future shipping costs based on a variety of inputs: fuel prices, labor costs, port fees, tariffs. For the fuel cost variable, instead of using the standard industry benchmark, the spot price of Brent crude oil, I had linked the formula to a different, far more obscure data set: the historical price of industrial-grade tungsten. Why tungsten? No reason, it was just a number. It was a piece of nonsensical, random data that had no business being in a logistics model. But for the past 3 years, the price of tungsten had been unusually stable. So if you looked at the model's historical analysis, the part that looked backward, everything seemed fine. The projections were accurate, the conclusions were sound. The model appeared to be working perfectly. The bomb was in the forward-looking projections. I knew, because I had spent a week researching it, that a massive new tungsten mine was set to open in Vietnam, flooding the global market. The price of tungsten was projected to collapse, dropping by nearly 70% over the next 6 months. My model, dutifully and logically, had incorporated this projected collapse into its calculations. The result was a series of beautiful charts showing that my hypothetical company's shipping costs were about to plummet. This, in turn, fed into the final summary slides, which projected a staggering, exponential, and completely fictitious increase in the company's net profit margin. The final number was a lie, built on a foundation of seemingly perfect logic. It was an actuary's poison pill. It was a trap that could only be spotted by someone who took the time to check the source code, to audit the raw data, to look under the hood. Someone like a chief financial officer at a multi-billion-dollar corporation. Someone like Foster would just see the final, spectacular number and present it as gospel. I attached the file to a new email. I typed Foster's personal address. The subject was "This is the last time," I hit send. Then I closed the email client, turned my full attention back to my shipping insurance model, and I worked. For the first time in weeks, my mind was quiet. The model was running. The outcome was now out of my hands. I had done everything I could. All that was left was the brutal, beautiful math. The hours ticked by. 9 anti-meridian came and went. Then 10. Then 11. The silence from my phone was absolute. I ate my sad desk salad at noon. I joined a conference call at 1 post-meridian and spoke intelligently about maritime liability caps. I was a ghost in my own life, a machine performing its functions while the real me was suspended in a state of unbearable anticipation. At 2:17 post-meridian, my desk phone rang, not my cell, my direct line at Commonwealth Surety Group. The caller ID read unknown. My hand was perfectly steady as I picked it up. Anderson Taylor. Is this Anderson Taylor? The voice on the other end was deep, powerful, and vibrating with a level of cold fury that seemed to suck the air out of my cubicle. This is Marcus Blackwood, senior partner at Sterling Stratagems. The damage report was coming in. Yes, Mr. Blackwood, how can I help you? I kept my voice calm, professional. You can start by telling me what in the name of God your brother just did, he snarled. I have just walked out of the most humiliating, catastrophic, and professionally damaging meeting of my entire 30-year career, and your brother, Foster Walsh, was the architect of the disaster. He stood in front of the entire executive board of Veridian Dynamics, their CEO, their CFO, their entire senior leadership, and presented a strategic roadmap that was, and I do not say this lightly, utter gibberish. I stayed silent. I let him talk. He couldn't open his original file, Blackwood continued, his voice like grinding stone. Some technical glitch. Then, like a magician pulling a rabbit out of a hat, he opens a backup file he said his analyst brother had sent him. And for the first 30 minutes it was fine. The historical data looked solid. The charts were pretty. He was charming them, doing that thing he does. And then he got to the financial projections. He paused, and I could hear him take a long, slow breath, as if trying to control a primal urge to scream. He projected with a straight face that Veridian could increase their net profit margin by 700% over the next 18 months by optimizing their supply chain. 700%. The CEO just laughed. But the CFO, a woman named Helen Tran who used to run forensic audits for the SEC, didn't laugh. She put on her glasses, walked up to the screen, and asked your brother a very simple question. She asked him, Blackwood said, his voice dropping to a deadly whisper, why his entire future cost model for global shipping was apparently pegged to the fluctuating market price of tungsten. I closed my eyes. It was more beautiful than I could have ever imagined. Your brother just stared at her, Blackwood went on. He had no idea what she was talking about. He started babbling about synergies and paradigm shifts. Tran just eviscerated him. She took control of his laptop and in front of everyone exposed the entire model as a complete fraudulent fabrication. She called it either the work of a con artist or a profound incompetent. Veridian Dynamics has terminated our contract, effective immediately. We have lost our biggest client. We are the laughingstock of the consulting world, and it is all because of your brother. I see, the words tasted like victory. So I am going to ask you one more time, Mr. Taylor, Blackwood said, his voice ice. What did you send him, and what did you know about it? Mr. Blackwood, My tone was now as cold and professional as his. My brother called me this morning in a panic. He told me he was unprepared for his meeting and asked me to send him a file, any file, to help him bluff his way through it. I sent him a deprecated, non-functional training model with junk data in it. I told him explicitly not to use it in a professional setting. If he chose to present a dummy file full of nonsense to one of your most important clients, then that is a reflection of his judgment, not my data. I had just thrown Foster under the bus, and then backed the bus over him a few times for good measure. There was a long silence on the other end. I could practically hear Marcus Blackwood processing the information, seeing the path of his own plausible deniability open up before him. Foster wasn't a failed genius. He was a reckless fraud who had lied to his superiors. I see, Blackwood said again, but his tone had changed. The anger was still there, but it was now focused, redirected. Thank you for your candor, Mr. Taylor. That clarifies things considerably. We will be handling Mr. Walsh's employment status internally. You can be assured it will be dealt with immediately. He hung up without saying goodbye. I placed the receiver back in its cradle. I swiveled my chair to face my monitor. The screen was still filled with my shipping insurance model. I minimized it. I opened my encrypted drive. I opened the ledger of ruin. I navigated to the Phase 2 Calculated Exposure tab. I found the line item I had created weeks ago. Objective Professional Decimation. I clicked on the cell next to it under the column heading Status. I typed a single word. Complete. The trap had closed, the bomb had detonated, and the beautiful, orderly, inevitable math of it all was the only justice I needed. The first pillar of my brother's fraudulent life had been reduced to rubble, and I was just getting started. The day after you detonate a nuclear bomb, you don't feel a sense of victory, you just feel the silence. The world doesn't rush in with congratulations or condemnations. It just goes quiet. The air gets still. You find yourself listening for the echo, for the sound of the shockwave finally arriving. I spent October 15th sitting in my cubicle at Commonwealth Surety, bathed in the gentle, fluorescent hum of corporate America, and I listened. The Veridian Dynamics disaster had happened. Foster's career at Sterling Stratagems was a smoking crater. I had confirmed it with my own ears from Marcus Blackwood himself, but the world kept turning. I ran my shipping insurance models. I drank my mediocre office coffee. I waited. Foster didn't call. I knew he wouldn't. A cornered narcissist doesn't apologize, he recalculates. He finds a new narrative, a new enemy, a new lie to tell himself. Right now, he would be deep in that process, rewriting the history of the last 24 hours to cast himself as the tragic hero, betrayed by his jealous, incompetent brother. Me. He would be telling that story to the only person who was still forced to listen, Sage. The first tremor arrived not as a sound, but as a digital silence. At 4:32 post-meridian, I checked Sage Flint's Instagram profile for the 10th time that day. Her feed, usually a relentless firehose of curated glamour and performative success, had been eerily quiet. Then I saw it. The number next to posts had gone down by one. I scrolled through her recent photos. The picture she had posted just a few days ago, the one with the wine glass and the caption about petty haters and her king, it was gone, deleted. It was a small act of digital housekeeping, but the meaning was as clear as a balance sheet. The king was no longer trending. The second tremor was auditory. My phone rang just after 7 post-meridian. It was Marigold. Her voice was afraid, not of confusion and worry. Anderson, honey, I did what you asked, she started without any preamble. I called Foster. I asked him about that nice Mr. Henderson from the lumber company, and he was so strange about it. I settled into my role as the concerned, helpless brother. Strange how? Her voice dropped. He got angry. He said he had no idea what I was talking about, that there was no Frank Henderson, no $20,000 deposit. He said I sounded crazy. He accused me of taking your side, Anderson. It was awful. He has never spoken to me like that before. I let the silence sit there for a moment. I am so sorry, Marigold. I never should have involved you. And then, she continued, her voice trembling slightly, I was on the phone with Susan Parker. You remember her? Her daughter was in dance class with Sage. And Susan said she heard the most terrible rumor. She said Foster lost his job, that he had some kind of breakdown in a big meeting. Anderson, what is going on? Is he all right? I am so worried he is having some kind of nervous collapse from the stress. It was perfect. The narrative I had carefully constructed for her was merging with the real-world fallout. In her mind, the two were now causally linked. Foster wasn't a con artist whose chickens were coming home to roost. He was a brilliant boy cracking under the pressure, lashing out at those who loved him, making up stories, forgetting things. My voice thickened with manufactured sympathy. I think the stress is getting to him. The business isn't doing well. He is in over his head. Now this. I will try to talk to him, Marigold. I will make sure he is okay. You are a good brother, Anderson, she sniffed. Always the responsible one. I hung up the phone and felt a cold wave of something that wasn't quite guilt, but wasn't victory either. It was the detached feeling of an actuary watching a predictive model perform flawlessly. The inputs were creating the expected outputs. The human cost was just another column on the spreadsheet. The fuse I had lit for Foster's professional life had detonated with a thunderclap. But the other fuse, the one I had personally hand-delivered to the concierge at the Gilded Lounge, was still burning, its progress silent and invisible. The package for Harrison Croft. The proof that Foster's membership was built on a foundation of lies and stolen money. The club was an institution of suffocating discretion. They wouldn't make a scene. There would be no public announcement. The only way to know for sure if my second bomb had landed would be to sift through the wreckage. Which is why, at 5:45 ante-meridian the following Tuesday, I found myself once again in my sensible Honda Accord, parked down the street from my brother's McMansion in Whispering Pines Estates. The sky was inky black. The air was cold enough to see my breath. I had a box of warm crullers on the passenger seat. My weekly tribute to the god of sanitation, Otto Jiang. He rolled up right on schedule, the groan of his truck's hydraulics cutting through the pre-dawn quiet. I met him at the curb, the box of donuts held out like a diplomatic offering. I offered morning Otto. Taylor, he grunted, grabbing the box with a grease-stained hand. You are becoming a regular fixture out here. You should start paying property taxes. He took a massive bite of a cruller. So, what is it this week? Looking for old love letters, lost lottery tickets. I kept it vague, just checking on the family paper trail. He chewed thoughtfully, his eyes scanning the 3 large bins at the end of Foster's driveway. Gotta say, he mumbled through the donut, your brother is the most interesting stop on my route. Never know what you are going to get. Last week it was a mountain of shredded paper. This week was weird, heavy on the glass. Glass? Yeah, like a lot of it. Sounded like a whole case of wine bottles got smashed in there. And a bunch of broken picture frames. Real shame. Someone went to a lot of trouble to break all that stuff up before they threw it out. My mind flashed to Sage's Instagram feed. The deleted photo, the silence, broken picture frames. It was a data point, a grim telling one. I nodded, thanks Otto, mind if I take a quick look? He turned back to his truck. Knock yourself out, just don't cut yourself on all that bad karma. I put on a pair of thick leather work gloves I had brought from the garage and approached the bins. The household waste bin was indeed heavy, and it clinked with the sound of broken glass. I set it aside. My target was the recycling. I lifted the lid. It was mostly empty, save for a few crushed Amazon boxes and one small white paper bag from a law office. And beneath that I saw it. A single, crisp, cream-colored envelope. It was torn in half, but the letterhead was unmistakable. It was the ornate, embossed crest of the Gilded Lounge. My heart gave a triumphant leap. I pulled the 2 halves of the envelope out. The letter was still inside, also torn neatly down the middle. I didn't try to read it there under the intermittent glare of the garbage truck's flashing lights. This was evidence. It needed to be processed in the sterile environment of my war room. I tucked the pieces carefully into the inside pocket of my jacket, a trophy from the front lines. I gave Otto a final nod, got back in my car, and drove home as the sun began to stain the eastern sky a bruised purple. Back in the study, I laid the pieces on my high-resolution scanner. I didn't even need Theo's fancy software for this one. The tier was clean. I scanned both halves and stitched them together digitally. The text materialized on my screen, cold, corporate, and utterly devastating. Dear Mr. Walsh, it began. This letter serves as formal notification from the membership committee of the Gilded Lounge. In accordance with Article 7, Section 4 of the club's bylaws regarding member integrity and disclosure, a review of your application and ongoing membership status was conducted on October 16th. The committee was presented with credible, corroborated evidence of significant material misrepresentation on your initial application. Specifically, your listed primary business enterprise, Artisan Oak Creations, has been found to be a non-viable entity founded upon the theft of intellectual property. Furthermore, our internal audit has confirmed that your initiation fee and subsequent monthly dues were paid via corporate financial instrument belonging to an LLC named Apex Global Holdings. Information provided to the committee indicates this entity is currently the subject of a federal inquiry for fraudulent activities, including tax evasion and the commingling of personal and corporate funds. These actions constitute a profound breach of the standards of conduct and personal integrity required of our members. Therefore, effective immediately, your membership at the Gilded Lounge is permanently and irrevocably revoked. You are hereby forbidden from entering club premises. Any outstanding charges on your account will be billed to you directly. We will expect a prompt settlement. Sincerely, Harrison Croft, Chairman Membership Committee. The Gilded Lounge. I read it 3 times. Credible, corroborated evidence. Federal inquiry. Profound breach. Harrison Croft hadn't just accepted my anonymous tip, he had done his own homework. He had likely made a few quiet calls, discovered the freshly filed DMCA notice, and maybe even had his own people look into Apex Global Holdings. I hadn't just given him smoke, I had given him the coordinates of the fire, and he had sent in the entire department. The sound of the broken glass Otto had described now made perfect sense. This letter would have been the final, humiliating straw for Sage. Foster's job she could spin, a brilliant consultant taking time off to launch his own venture, a strategic pivot. But this was different. This was social excommunication. This was being blacklisted from the only stage that mattered in their world. You can't spin being publicly declared a liar and a fraud by the very arbiters of the society you are so desperate to join. Her king hadn't just lost his job, he had been exiled from the kingdom. The broken picture frames were her answer. As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a notification, a new post from Sage Flint. I opened the app. Her latest post wasn't a photo of her, or of Foster, or of a fancy meal. It was a simple, text-based image, black letters on a stark white background. It was the kind of post people use to announce a death in the family or a life-changing diagnosis. The text read, "Sometimes the universe sends you a sign that a particular chapter of your life is over. The bravest thing a person can do is to listen. I am listening. It is time to prune the branches that no longer bear fruit, to cut away the rot so that new growth can begin. I am entering a new season of creative and personal truth. Thank you to everyone who has supported me on my journey. The next stage begins now. Alone." It was over. The self-absorbed, melodramatic, exquisitely passive-aggressive breakup announcement. She hadn't even tagged him. She had just written him out of the narrative, demoted him from king to rot. I took a screenshot, saved it, and logged the file reference in my ledger. I leaned back in my father's chair. The silence in the house felt different now. It wasn't the silence of absence anymore. It was the silence of a completed task. Foster's professional life was a smoking ruin. His social life was a pile of broken glass and a dramatic Instagram post. The 2 great pillars that held up the facade of his life were gone. He had no job, no income stream beyond the dwindling, stolen funds in his personal account. He had no status, no gilded lounge to swagger into, no glamorous partner to show off. All he had left was the lie he was living in. The house, our parents' house, the foundational asset he had leveraged to build his entire kingdom of cards, and I was about to pull that card out from the bottom of the deck. I turned back to the ledger of ruin. I found the line item for objective, social annihilation. Next to it, under the status column, I typed the familiar, satisfying word, complete. Then I created a new heading at the bottom of the page. It was the final phase of my project. The culmination of all my research, all my risk assessment, all my calculated rage. Phase 3, the final reconciliation. The first sub-item under it was simple: schedule meeting with Meridian Capital Bank Legal Department. The objective was no longer about destruction. It was about restoration. It was time to save my house. It was time to balance the books. And Foster, stripped of his job, his money, and his social shield, had absolutely nothing left to fight me with. The model predicted he was about to face the one thing he had spent his entire life avoiding: consequences. The aftermath of a successful demolition is not an explosion. It is the dust. It is the slow, silent settling of particles in the air, the gradual reveal of a fundamentally altered landscape. My brother's world had been professionally and socially demolished. Now I was breathing in the dust, waiting for it to clear so I could survey the damage and begin the final phase, reclamation. My father's study had been a war room for weeks. Now, it felt more like an accounting office on the last day of the fiscal year. The frantic energy of data acquisition was gone, replaced by the calm, methodical process of preparing a final report. My objective was the meeting with Meridian Capital Bank. I had requested it via dry, formal email to their legal department, citing significant, documented irregularities regarding the loan against the Maple Grove Lane property. They had agreed to a meeting on Thursday, October 20th, with a palpable lack of enthusiasm. I was just another number on their docket, another defaulting homeowner with a sob story. They had no idea I wasn't coming with a story. I was coming with a ledger. For 2 days, I translated my digital ledger of ruin into a physical artifact. I bought a heavy-duty 4-inch Deering binder and a ream of 32-pound premium paper, the kind that feels substantial in your hand. I printed everything. Every shredded and reconstructed bank statement, every EXIF data report from Theo, every screenshot of Sage's Instagram feed, every email. Each piece of evidence was slipped into a clear plastic sleeve and placed behind a tabbed divider. Tab A, Signature Analysis. Tab B, Timeline of Fraudulent Activity. Tab C, Financial Forensics, Apex Global Holdings. It was a masterpiece of organized accusation, a chronological, cross-referenced, footnoted encyclopedia of my brother's downfall. It weighed nearly 10 pounds. It was the heaviest thing in the world. The night before the meeting, I called Ivy. "Big day tomorrow," Ivy's voice warmed through the phone. "You ready to go into the lion's den?" "I am as ready as I will ever be." I looked at the monolithic binder on my desk. One last question for my friendly neighborhood legal librarian. I am not asking for advice. I am asking for a mindset. How do I talk to these people? What do they care about? A pause stretched on the other end of the line. Okay, think of it this way. You are not talking to people. You are talking to a balance sheet. The bank's lawyers don't care about what is fair. They don't care about your family. They don't care about your brother. They care about one thing and one thing only: mitigating financial risk for their client, Meridian Capital Bank. They will do a cold calculation. What is the projected cost of fighting you versus the projected cost of settling with you? That is the only math they understand. Don't talk to them about betrayal. Talk to them about liability. Don't talk about justice. Talk about their exposure. Speak their language. Liability and exposure. I repeated the words, letting them settle. I can do that. I know you can, Andy. Ivy's confidence was a steadying hand. Go get 'em. Meridian Capital Bank's corporate headquarters was a monument of glass and steel in a sterile office park. The lobby was a cathedral of marble and silence. I was led to a conference room on the 32nd floor, a glass box with a panoramic view of the city that seemed designed to make you feel small. 3 people were waiting for me, seated on one side of a vast mahogany table. 2 men and a woman, all in dark, expensive suits, all with the same look of bored, predatory competence. They didn't introduce themselves beyond their last names, Davies, Chen, and Rodriguez. They were the bank's in-house counsel. Rodriguez, the woman at the center, seemed to be in charge. "Mr. Taylor," Rodriguez began, her voice crisp and devoid of any warmth. "We have your file. It seems straightforward. A co-signed home equity line of credit, 90 days delinquent. We are here to discuss your payment options before the foreclosure proceeds." I didn't say a word. I simply placed my 10-pound binder on the table. The sound it made in the quiet room was a solid, definitive thud. I pushed it gently across the polished surface towards them. "I believe you will find it is not quite that straightforward." My voice was even. Davies, the younger of the 2 men, smirked and pulled the binder towards him. He opened it to the first page. The smirk vanished from his face. Rodriguez and Chen leaned in to look. "Let me walk you through the executive summary," I began, my voice as calm and steady as if I were presenting quarterly earnings. Tab A contains a forensic analysis of the signatures on your loan document. You will find high-resolution scans of my verified historical signature next to the one on your paperwork. On page 3, you will find a preliminary opinion from a certified handwriting expert, identifying 17 points of divergence consistent with a sophisticated digital forgery. I watched their eyes scan the page. The air in the room had changed. The boredom was gone, replaced by a tense, focused silence. Tab B, I continued, provides a complete timeline of the fraud. It begins with the deletion of my parents' financial records from a shared family cloud server, an act which is documented by an IP address and a timestamp, proving intent to conceal assets. It proceeds to the fraudulent loan application the very next day. You will notice your bank's loan officer, a Brenda Potvin, approved this $250,000 disbursement in under 24 hours, apparently without a single follow-up call to the estate's primary executor, me, to verify the transaction. I saw Chen scribble a note on his legal pad. Brenda Potvin was about to have a very bad day. Tab C is the most critical from a liability standpoint. I delivered the killer blow. It contains the reconstructed bank statements for the Shell Corporation, Apex Global Holdings, into which the funds were dispersed. You will find irrefutable proof that this corporate account was used for personal expenses, from the purchase of a Maserati Ghibli to yoga lessons and grocery bills. This is a classic case of commingling funds, which not only constitutes bank fraud on the part of the client, but raises serious questions about Meridian Capital's due diligence and compliance with federal Know Your Customer and anti-money laundering statutes. Rodriguez's face was a stone mask, but I could see a muscle twitching in her jaw. To summarize, I concluded, folding my hands on the table. Your institution has been party to a multi-layered fraud. You have failed in your fiduciary duty to protect an estate, you have been negligent in your verification processes, and you are now exposed to a significant civil lawsuit which, I can assure you, will be filed by the end of this week. We will be seeking not only the full value of the fraudulent loan, but punitive damages for emotional distress, legal fees, and the reputational damage your foreclosure notice has inflicted upon my family's name. Furthermore, I feel I have a duty to forward this entire binder to the Office of the Controller of the Currency as evidence of your institution's dangerously lax internal controls. I stopped talking. The only sound in the room was the faint hum of the HVAC system. I had laid all the cards on the table. I had spoken their language. I had shown them in excruciating detail the size and shape of their own liability. Rodriguez closed the binder slowly. She looked at Davies, then at Chen. A silent, frantic conversation passed between them in a matter of seconds. Mr. Taylor, her voice was now stripped of all its earlier condescension. Would you excuse us for a few moments? I nodded, stood up, and walked out into the hallway. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt nothing at all. I was an actuary who had just presented a very successful risk model. The outcome was now a statistical certainty. 15 minutes later, the door opened. Rodriguez beckoned me back in. The atmosphere was completely transformed. Mr. Taylor, she began, her tone now conciliatory, almost gentle. First, let me apologize on behalf of Meridian Capital Bank for the oversight that has occurred here. It is clear that our standard procedures were not followed in this instance. She slid a single sheet of paper across the table. This is a draft of a settlement agreement. In it, Meridian Capital Bank agrees to absorb the full value of the fraudulent loan. The debt will be wiped from your record, and we will issue a formal letter of correction to all 3 credit bureaus. We will, of course, cover all legal fees you have incurred to date. In return, you agree to release the bank from any further liability in this matter. I picked up the paper and read it. It was everything I wanted. There is one more thing, I pushed the words out. The criminal aspect. Foster Walsh committed a felony, bank fraud, wire fraud, forgery. I expect you to pursue this vigorously. Rodriguez nodded. Mr. Taylor, I can assure you our fraud division will be filing a formal criminal complaint with the Commonwealth's attorney and the FBI before the end of the day. We take these matters very seriously. Especially, I thought, when they need a scapegoat to offer up to the federal regulators you are about to call. Then we have an agreement. I sealed the deal. I signed the paper, my own true signature flowing cleanly from the pen. I stood up, shook Rodriguez's oddly limp hand, and walked out of the conference room. I didn't take the binder with me. It was their problem now. The elevator ride down felt like a slow, controlled descent from a very high altitude. I stepped out into the marble lobby and into the gray afternoon light. It was over. The house was safe. The largest liability on my ledger, the $250,000 anchor that had been threatening to pull me under, was gone. As I got into my car, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. I answered it. Hello. "Is this Anderson?" The voice was choked with tears. It was Marigold. "Oh, Anderson, it is just awful, the most terrible thing." "Marigold, what is wrong? Calm down." "It is Foster," she wailed. "He just left here. He showed up at my door 1 hour ago. He looked like a ghost. He said he had been evicted from his house. That sage left him. He said his bank accounts were frozen. He was begging me for money, Anderson. He was yelling. He kept saying it was all your fault, that you had ruined him. He looked sick. He smelled of whiskey. I didn't know what to do. I gave him $200 and he just snatched it and ran out. I have never seen him like this. He is not my golden boy anymore. He is a stranger." The shockwave had arrived. Foster was broke, homeless, and lashing out at the last person on earth who still held any affection for him. He had finally burned his last bridge. "It is okay, Marigold." My voice was steady. "You did what you thought was right, just don't give him any more money, and if he comes back, you call the police." I hung up, a profound sense of finality settling over me. The implosion was no longer a projection. It was a real-time event. The dust was settling and the landscape was one of total devastation. My brother, the golden child, the man who glided, was now in a free fall with no parachute. I didn't go straight home. I drove past Whispering Pines Estates. The black Maserati was gone from the driveway. In its place was a large, orange moving truck and 2 men were hauling a generic gray sofa out the front door. A bright yellow "For Lease" sign was already staked into the perfect, manicured lawn. The stage had been dismantled. The show was over. That evening I sat in my father's study. The house was mine again. It felt solid beneath my feet, a safe harbor, but the work wasn't finished. There was one final entry to make in the ledger, one last reconciliation. I pulled out my phone and did a quick search. It didn't take long to find him. His driver's license was still registered to the Maple Grove address, so the DMV had forwarded his mail. Among the junk was a change of address confirmation. His new home was a dreary, budget apartment complex on the far side of the county called Creekwood Flats. It was the kind of place people go when they have no other options. I opened the ledger of ruin on my laptop one last time. I created a new, final tab summary report. It was a simple, one-page document. It listed the total principal stolen, the calculated interest, the legal fees I would have incurred, the hours of my life I had spent cleaning up his mess converted into a billable rate. And then at the bottom, I added one final, non-financial line item. Familial trust value. I entered the starting value, a number I couldn't quantify but knew in my heart. Then I created the final, current value, 0. I printed the single sheet of paper. It felt like an invoice for a soul. I folded it, put it in a plain white envelope, and stood up. The books were almost balanced. All that was left was to deliver the final statement. And this one I had to deliver in person. The drive to Creekwood Flats felt like crossing a border into a different country. You leave the manicured lawns and quiet, tree-lined streets of established Arlington and enter a landscape of peeling paint and pragmatic despair. The complex was a sprawling, 3-story labyrinth of beige vinyl siding, stained with green mildew in the places where the sun never reached. The parking lot was a graveyard of dented sedans and work vans, with oil stains blooming on the cracked asphalt like dark, permanent flowers. Balconies were cluttered not with tasteful patio furniture, but with broken laundry baskets, rusted bicycles, and forlorn-looking satellite dishes aimed at a silent sky. This wasn't a lifestyle community. It was a holding pen. This was the physical manifestation of a zero balance. I found his building, number 12, tucked away in the back, facing a murky retention pond and a chain-link fence. The air in the open-air breezeway was thick with the smells of stale cigarette smoke, damp carpet, and the clashing aromas of a dozen different dinners being cooked on a budget. A baby was crying in one apartment, a rhythmic, inconsolable wail. From another, I could hear the muffled thumping of a bass line and the faint shouting of a daytime television show. It was the sound of lives being lived in close, ungraceful proximity. His apartment was 2B on the second floor. The door was a flat metal thing, painted a hideous shade of institutional brown and bearing a small dent near the knob as if someone had kicked it. I had the single sheet of paper from my ledger, the final invoice, folded neatly in my jacket pocket. I raised my hand to knock, but I didn't have to. The door was already slightly ajar, a dark crack in the failing light of the hallway. I pushed it open. Foster. The apartment was one small, sad room. A stained, beige carpet covered the floor. The only light came from a cheap floor lamp in the corner, casting long, distorted shadows. Most of his expensive furniture from Whispering Pines was gone, likely seized or sold. A single stylish leather armchair sat in the middle of the room like a museum piece, looking comically out of place. The rest of the furniture consisted of stacked cardboard boxes and a mattress on the floor in the corner, tangled in a single gray sheet. The air smelled of stale whiskey and defeat. He was sitting in the armchair, staring at a blank television screen. He was wearing the same clothes I had seen him in during that disastrous encounter at the Gilded Lounge, the tailored suit, but it was now horribly wrinkled, the tie loosened, the shirt stained. He hadn't shaved in days, a patchy, desperate stubble clinging to his pale cheeks. The golden child was gone. This was just a man in a box. He turned his head slowly as I walked in, his eyes unfocused at first, then narrowing with a flicker of recognition, followed by a wave of pure, undiluted hate. "You," he rasped, his voice a dry rustle of its former self. "Get out." I didn't move, I just stood there in the middle of his ruined life, the door clicking shut behind me. "We need to talk." "We have nothing to talk about," he sneered, trying to summon some of his old arrogance, but it was like a wet match trying to strike. "You have already said everything you needed to say, haven't you? You called my boss, you called my club, you probably even called Sage, didn't you? You poisoned everyone against me." "I didn't have to poison anyone, Foster. I just gave them the data, they drew their own conclusions." He let out a short, bitter laugh that turned into a cough. "The data, of course, always the numbers with you, isn't it? You can't just be a person, you have to be a walking spreadsheet." He pushed himself up from the chair, unsteady on his feet. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him, shrunken inside his expensive suit. "You did this to me, all of it, my whole life, you blew it up. For what? For a house, for some money? Are you happy now, Andy? Does it make you feel like a big man, seeing me like this?" I didn't answer, I just watched him, my face a mask of professional neutrality. This was the predictable emotional outburst, the initial lashing out. I had modeled this behavior. It was step one. "Look at me," he shouted, his voice cracking. He swept his arm around the pathetic little room. "This is what you wanted, right? This is your victory. My career is gone. My fiancé is gone. My money is gone. I am living in a shoebox that smells like boiled cabbage and failure. Congratulations, you win. You finally beat your little brother." He was waiting for me to react, to gloat, to yell back. He needed the fight. He needed the drama. It was the only currency he had left. I refused to give it to him. "This isn't a victory," I said, my voice quiet but carrying in the small space. "It is a reconciliation." My calmness seemed to enrage him more than any insult could have. He took a step towards me, his face twisted. "Reconciliation? You call this reconciliation? You destroyed me." "I didn't destroy you, Foster," I said, my voice as level as a freshly paved road. "I audited you, you destroyed yourself, I just took notes." That single sentence seemed to land like a physical blow. The anger in his eyes faltered, replaced by a flicker of something else. Panic, the dawning, horrified realization that he was not the victim in this story. He was the variable that had caused the entire system to crash. He stumbled back and sank into the armchair, his head in his hands. The fight was gone. The performance was over. Now came step two, the pivot, the begging. "Andy," he whispered, his voice muffled by his hands. Okay, you are right, I messed up bad, I got in over my head, I made some bad choices." He looked up at me and his eyes were swimming with tears. They were real tears, I think, the tears of a man who has finally, truly run out of options. The old charm, the $1 million smile was gone, replaced by a raw, desperate plea. "But you can't just leave me like this, you can't, we are brothers." The word hung in the air between us. Brothers, it was his last resort, the final card in a hand full of nothing. "We are family," he choked out. "You are all I have left, I am drowning, Andy, you have to help me, I will do anything. I will pay it all back, I swear, every single penny. I need a little help, a loan, just to get an apartment, to get a new suit, to get back on my feet, I can get another job, I am good at what I do. You know I am, people like me. I can make it all back in 1 year, we can be partners again. A real partnership this time, 50-50, we can call it Taylor & Taylor Strategic Solutions." It was breathtaking. Even here at the absolute bottom, his first instinct was to pitch, to sell, to create a new phantom company built on a foundation of empty promises. He wasn't asking for forgiveness. He was asking for a new round of seed funding. "This isn't a business negotiation, Foster." "Then what is it?" he pleaded, getting to his feet again, coming closer. He smelled faintly of whiskey and desperation. "It is about the house, right? Okay. It is yours, 100%. I will sign whatever you want. I don't care about the house anymore. I just need my brother back. I need you to help me." He reached out as if to grab my arm, and I took a small step back, an involuntary, instinctive recoil. The gesture wasn't lost on him. His face crumpled. "Please, Andy," he whispered. "Don't do this. What would Mom and Dad say? If they could see us now, they would be heartbroken. They would want us to stick together. They would want you to forgive me." That was it, the final, desperate play. He had invoked the ghosts. He was using our parents' memory not as a reason for his theft this time, but as a shield to protect him from the consequences. I looked at my brother, this broken man in a ruined room, and I felt absolutely nothing. No pity, no anger, no satisfaction. The emotional columns on my personal ledger had all been zeroed out. All that was left was the final, cold, hard math. "You want to know what Mom and Dad would say?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "They would be heartbroken. You are right about that. They would be heartbroken that their youngest son took the home they worked their entire lives to build and sold it for a car, a club membership, and a few fancy vacations. They would be ashamed that you took their memory, the story of Dad's love for woodworking, and turned it into a cheap lie to defraud your own brother." Every word was a perfectly calibrated impact, and I could see them landing, shattering the last of his defenses. "You talk about family," I continued, my voice never rising. "Family was a liability you never bothered to price into your risk assessment. You talk about paying it back. You couldn't even pay back the $10,000 business loan you drained in 48 hours. You talk about partnership. A partnership is built on trust, an asset you liquidated a long, long time ago." I reached into my jacket and pulled out the single, folded sheet of paper. I held it out to him. He just stared at it, his hand trembling as if it were a subpoena. "You are an analyst, Foster, a big picture guy, so here is the big picture. Here is the final report on our joint venture." He wouldn't take it. I stepped forward and placed it on the arm of the single, ridiculous leather chair. "It is a summary," I said. "It details the principal you stole, the calculated interest you would have owed, an estimate of the legal fees you have cost the estate. It even includes a line item for my time, billed at a standard forensic accountant's rate, for the hundreds of hours I had to spend auditing your pathetic, cliché little fraud." He stared at the paper, then back at me, his eyes wide with a kind of dawning horror. He was finally starting to understand. This wasn't a negotiation. This wasn't a family argument. It was a closing statement. "And at the bottom," I said, my voice dropping to a near whisper, "you will see the final entry. The value of the one asset you had that was truly priceless. Familial trust. I have listed its starting value as incalculable, and I have listed its current value." He looked at me, a silent question in his tear-filled eyes. I didn't need to say the number, he knew. I turned towards the door. The transaction was complete. My work here was done. "Andy, wait," he choked out behind me. "Don't go. What am I supposed to do?" I stopped, my hand on the doorknob, but I didn't turn around. I thought for a moment. I thought about the forged signature, the lies, the photo on the yacht, the casual cruelty of locking me out of my own father's workshop. I thought about the man who had been so certain of my predictability, of my quiet, dependable weakness, that he had never once considered the possibility that I would do exactly what he had done: perform a cold, brutal, and entirely self-interested risk assessment. "I don't know, Foster," I said, looking at the dented brown door in front of me. "But from what I hear, the FBI is very interested in your case. The bank is pursuing federal charges, so I guess you should probably find a good lawyer. I am sure you can find one who will work pro bono." I pulled the door open and stepped out into the dim, stale air of the breezeway. The sound of the crying baby had finally stopped. "Andy, please," his voice echoed behind me, thin and pathetic. "Don't leave me." I let the door swing shut, the click of the latch a final, punctuating sound. I didn't look back. I walked down the concrete stairs, my footsteps sure and steady. I walked past the overflowing dumpsters and the graveyard of broken-down cars. I got into my sensible, paid-for sedan and started the engine. I had just walked away from the only family I had left, leaving him to be consumed by the consequences he had so arrogantly created. I didn't feel like a hero. I didn't feel like a villain. I didn't feel joy. I felt balanced. It was the clean, quiet, profound emptiness of a project completed, an audit finished, a complex equation finally solved. It has been 18 months since I left my brother standing in the wreckage of his own life. The silence that followed was deafening at first, then gradually it just became quiet. The good kind, the kind you can build a life in. I am sitting in my father's workshop. My workshop now, I suppose. The air smells of sawdust and mineral spirits, a scent so deeply woven into my childhood it feels like a memory I can breathe. The new deadbolt Foster had installed is long gone, replaced by the original lock set I found in a coffee can full of old hardware. The brass key, worn smooth and familiar, slides in like it is coming home. I am not building anything ambitious. No bespoke, high-end furniture. I am just fixing one of the old kitchen chairs, the one with the perpetual wobble that drove my mother crazy. A little wood glue, a couple of clamps. A simple, honest repair. It feels good. It feels real. For a long time after that last meeting at Creekwood Flats, I waited for the other shoe to drop. An angry phone call, a desperate email, a vengeful act of petty vandalism. But there was nothing. The shockwave of his implosion had passed, and all that was left was the grim, bureaucratic fallout. That I could track. The criminal case against Foster Walsh, initiated by Meridian Capital Bank's very motivated fraud department, was swift and brutally efficient. With my binder of evidence as their roadmap, the assistant United States attorney had an open and shut case. There was no dramatic trial. There were no surprise witnesses. Foster, stripped of his charm and his money, couldn't afford a high-powered defense team. He was just another guy in a cheap suit with a public defender, facing a mountain of evidence that was as irrefutable as it was embarrassing. He took a plea deal, wire fraud, bank fraud, and 2 counts of aggravated identity theft. The tax evasion charges were rolled into the sentencing. The final number on the ledger was 87 months in a low-security federal correctional institution. 7 years and 3 months. I received a formal notice from the Victim Services Coordinator in the mail. I read it, filed it under W for Walsh Foster, and went on with my day. He tried to reach out once, about 1 month before his sentencing. A letter arrived written on cheap lined paper, the return address a county jail. The handwriting was shaky, barely recognizable. It was a rambling, self-pitying mess, full of misplaced Bible quotes and half-hearted apologies that all circled back to how I had never understood his vision, how the pressure to succeed had been too much for him. It was a pitch, one last, pathetic pitch for sympathy. Tucked inside was a collect call request form. I read the letter, then walked it to the shredder in my study, the same one I had used to piece together his secrets. I turned his final plea into meaningless, cross-cut confetti and tossed it in the recycling. Some things are non-salvageable. Sage Flint did not get her Copenhagen Fellowship, because Alastair Finch and the North Atlantic Choreography Fellowship never existed outside of a disposable email address and a public library computer. I checked her social media a few months ago, a final act of closing the books. Her feed is different now. The exotic travel and fawning captions about her king have been replaced by pictures of her teaching Introduction to Modern Dance to teenagers in a suburban community center. She rebranded her breakup as a bold artistic choice, a deliberate stripping away of materialism to find her authentic corporeal voice. She is still performing. She just has a much smaller stage and a far less gullible audience. She landed on her feet as I knew she would. The willfully ignorant are remarkably resilient. I had coffee with Marigold last month. It was difficult. I walked her through the whole thing, not with anger but with the quiet, sad finality of an auditor presenting his findings. I showed her copies of the forged signature, the bank statements from Apex Global, the court filings. She didn't cry, not at first. She just sat there, her teacup trembling in her hand, the architecture of the golden boy she had loved and protected for 40 years crumbling to dust around her. The truth didn't set her free, it just made her profoundly sad. Our relationship is different now. It is quieter, more honest, tinged with the shared grief for a person who, we both finally had to admit, never really existed. My true allies, my real family through all of this, were the ones I chose. Ivy Garza is now my go-to for terrible legal puns and excellent advice on navigating the labyrinth of local bureaucracy. She refuses to let me pay for coffee anymore. You have balanced your lifetime ledger with the universe, she told me. Now you are on a cash-only basis. Theo and I have a standing poker night again. He helped me build a state-of-the-art, secure server in the basement of the house on Maple Grove Lane, a digital fortress where my data now lives. In return, I helped him streamline the accounting for Tech Revival Solutions, building him a series of interlocking spreadsheets so beautiful they almost made him weep. He calls it the Anderson. He says my revenge was the most glorious application of applied nerddom he has ever witnessed. He is probably right. I still see Otto Jiang on his Tuesday route. I don't go out to Whispering Pines anymore, but his route also covers a commercial district I drive through on my way to work. Sometimes, if I have a moment, I will pull over and hand him a box of donuts. He just tips his cap, gives me that knowing smile, and says, "Keeping the paper trail clean, Taylor?" It is our little joke. A small nod to the man whose casual observation about shredded paper broke the whole case wide open. You never know where your most valuable assets will come from. For a while, life returned to a version of normal. I went to my job at Commonwealth Surety Group. I modeled the risk of earthquakes in Ohio and the probability of satellite debris hitting a data center. It was good work, it was stable, it was safe, and it felt completely, utterly pointless. I had spent 1 year performing the most intense, high-stakes risk assessment of my life, and the target wasn't a corporation, it was a person. The liability wasn't financial, it was existential. And I had discovered, to my own surprise, that I was exceptionally good at it. About 6 months ago, I walked into my boss's office and gave my notice. He was shocked. "But you are the best actuary we have, Anderson. You are the foundation." "Foundations are meant to be built upon," I told him. 2 months later, I cashed out a small, carefully calculated portion of my 401k and started my own company. It is not a flashy consultancy. There are no buzzwords in the mission statement. The office is the spare bedroom at the house on Maple Grove Lane. The business card is simple, stark white with clean, black letters. It says, "Taylor Forensic Auditing, we balance the books." I don't work for massive corporations. I don't help hedge funds quantify their exposure. My clients are people like me, small business owners who suspect a partner is cooking the books, heirs to an estate who think an executor is playing fast and loose with the assets, people caught in the crosshairs of a sophisticated lie, who don't have the resources to fight a prolonged legal battle, but who know in their gut that the numbers don't add up. I am their human calculator. I am their personal actuary of ruin. I find the truth in the spreadsheets, in the metadata, in the shredded documents, in the recycling bin. I don't offer legal advice. I don't make emotional appeals. I just build them a fortress of irrefutable data. I build them a ledger, and I hand it to them, a weapon made of pure, unassailable fact, and let them fight their own battles. It is the most satisfying work I have ever done. I am no longer the unseen engine. I am the one who draws the map. Sometimes, late at night, when a case is particularly frustrating, I think about Foster. I don't think about the broken man in the cheap apartment. I think about the golden child, the master of the shortcut, the man who saw my meticulous nature not as a strength, but as a limitation. He was like so many people in the world, people who believe that charisma is a substitute for competence, that a good story is more valuable than good data. They see men like me as the steady, boring bedrock upon which their magnificent, unstable towers are built. They see us as predictable. And they are right, we are predictable. That was Foster's fatal miscalculation. He predicted I would be methodical. He predicted I would be thorough. He predicted I would document everything. He just never predicted that I would do it for myself. My revenge wasn't a moment of cathartic rage. It wasn't a single cinematic confrontation. It was a long, slow, grinding process. It was death by 1,000 receipts. It was a victory achieved not by changing who I was, but by embracing it, by weaponizing the very traits he disdained. He thought he was a risk-taker, but a true risk analyst knows that the most dangerous man in the room is never the loudest. He is the quiet one in the corner who has read the fine print, who has run the numbers, and who knows with statistical certainty exactly how the whole damn system is going to collapse. The books on my brother are closed. His account is settled. In my own ledger, for the first time in my life, has an entry in the asset column that I never knew how to quantify before: peace of mind. The final balance is positive, and that, I have come to realize, is the only number that really matters.
If you enjoyed this video, please hit the thumbs up button to like it. And please do subscribe to support the channel.